Amidst the crumbling ruins of a once thriving metropolis, where only shattered remnants of human civilization remain, a breathless hero pins his opponent to the dust. The captive, a white-haired man with piercing blue eyes, smirks, claiming he saw this coming. "You're nothing like those pathetic weaklings you brought," he taunts. The hero snaps at him to shut his mouth, but the villain goads him on, daring him to finish the job. He demands the killing blow, mocking that the hero is the only one capable of landing it. But the hero flat out refuses. He refuses to soak his own hands in blood. He made a vow to his fallen squad that he would drag this monster straight to the electric chair. True justice has to run its course. The law will be the one to strike him down. But looking back on that fateful moment, he is absolutely consumed by regret. He should have ripped the villain's life away right then and there. Days later, breaking news broadcasts flash across every screen. Sung Huang, the global terror who plunged the world into pure panic, is finally in chains and sentenced to immediate execution. To keep everyone safe, they slapped a heavy-duty power-dampening collar around his neck. He is locked away in basement level 5 of Ruckus Prison, a notorious fortress that has housed every major supervillain in history. Meanwhile, the valiant heroes who bled alongside Gang Yu-so are being laid to rest side by side. Their joint funeral takes place tonight, a massive tribute to ensure their brutal sacrifice wasn't just a waste. Gang Yu can't even stomach the sight of their faces on the television. Suddenly the screen clicks black. A voice behind him scolds him for stressing out while his body is still healing. It's his older brother, Gang Ho-so, the chief inspector over at Ruckus Prison. Staring at his brother, Gang Yu looks down at his own trembling palms, swallowed by a suffocating darkness. He should have slaughtered that beast with his own bare hands. Gang Ho gently reminds him of the promise he made to his squad. There was absolutely zero he could have done to stop the massacre anyway. He echoes a fallen teammate's words: heroes are defined by the lives they save, not the bodies they drop. She had insisted that during their raid, nobody plays executioner. No matter how vile the target, even monsters used to be human. They deserved their day in court. Gang Yu had scoffed at her naive idealism back then, demanding to know what happens if the squad gets wiped out instead. That was the exact moment she forced him to swear. Even if the entire team fell, he wouldn't cross that line, no matter how much the bastard deserved it. Gang Ho stands by that very same principle, believing that only a judge and jury hold the right to end a life. But ironically, it's correctional officers like himself who are burdened with actually flipping the switch. Leaning in, he whispers a classified secret. Huang is scheduled for the lethal chair next week, and Gang Ho will be the one in the room. He tells his little brother that his hero work is done. Let the justice system handle the trash. For now, it's time to go say a proper, final goodbye to his fallen comrades. At the memorial site, seas of blooming bouquets and tear-soaked letters blanket the graves, while furious crowds scream for Huang's immediate execution. Gang Yu quietly steps up, laying down a solitary blue rose. But fast forward 1 week, on the exact day of Huang's execution, Gang Ho is brutally murdered. The psychotic villain, a man who butchered thousands for a twisted, outdated cause, is still breathing, while the older brother, a righteous man who sacrificed everything for the law, was tossed in a body bag. Slumping into a chair at his brother's wake, Seun-jo, the imposing warden of Ruckus Prison, approaches. She quietly asks if he has a minute to talk privately. When he nods, she slides him a piece of security footage from the execution chamber. With a heavy heart, he hits play. The grainy video shows the guards dragging a shackled Huang toward his death. The villain instantly clocks Gang Ho's resemblance to the hero. He sniffed out the fact that the older brother was completely powerless. Is that why he's stuck babysitting inmates? Huang taunts him playfully, guessing which brother was actually the older one. Gang Ho remains stone-faced, totally ignoring the bait, until the psychopath asks a chilling question. How does it, since the guard is the one pushing the execution button, he's stacked up a body count just like Huang. So what's the rush like? Huang smirks, volunteering his own answer first. It's pathetically easy. Disgusted, Gang Ho demands how he could say something so vile. But Huang, with his powers, a single flick of his finger, makes a human body burst into a sickening shower of crimson gore. Gang Ho fires back that they are absolutely nothing alike. Every single time he carries out a death sentence, a crushing, suffocating guilt tears him apart from the inside. It doesn't matter that he's just pressing a sterile plastic button. The act gives him brutal night terrors, leaving him tossing and turning in cold sweats. No matter how guilty the inmates are, the ghosts of the men he executes live absolutely rent-free in his head, haunting him until the day he dies. Huang just tilts his head and asks why the hell he still works there. If that was true, so be it. But Gang Ho figured somebody had to do the dirty work. At the end of the day, it was just a paycheck. Right as the lethal sequence was set to launch, Gang Ho demanded Huang's final. Instead, the psychopath flashed a twisted grin and simply asked which of the two brothers was older. Disgusted, Gang Ho triggered the sequence. The lethal countdown ticked backward, but right at 1, the footage went pitch black. Sayun breaks down the footage, revealing that a split second before death, the entire facility suffered a massive blackout. An untraceable EMP blast had wiped the grid, granting Huang the perfect opening to break free. The guards instantly hit the deck. The veteran officer frantically radioed for heavy backup, screaming that their high-value target was loose. But the split second Huang's fingers grazed his skin, the veteran began violently seizing, grotesque boils erupting across his flesh, until exactly as predicted, he violently detonated right in Gang Ho's face. Huang casually strolled through the gore, chuckling that Gang Ho must be the older sibling. He just wanted to be absolutely sure. Frozen in shock, Gang Ho fell back on his training. He executed his sole remaining duty. He swung at the monster. Of course, it was completely futile. Huang effortlessly ripped his entire arm from its socket. Yet the freak remained obsessed with their ages, demanding an answer. Bleeding out and utterly shattered, Gang Ho gripped his baton and charged forward anyway, because true justice demanded that monsters like this be put down. But in a single sickening crunch, Huang crushed the brave guard into a lifeless mound. That same EMP blast had popped the locks on every single cell block. Now the absolute worst of the worst practically owned the entire compound. The military barely managed to lock down the perimeter, preventing a mass breakout. But dozens of guards were trapped inside, likely butchered by now. Gang Yu coldly demands to know who orchestrated the blackout, but Sayun admits they are completely in the dark. The investigation is still ongoing. She desperately apologizes for crashing his brother's funeral to beg for a favor. But she has no choice. Will he crush the prison uprisings? Without a second of hesitation, Gang Yu accepts, but he demands one crucial condition. He recalls conversations with his old crew, how they constantly preach that true heroes save lives. They don't take them. And his late brother believed that criminals could only be judged by the strict letter of the law. Nobody else had that right. The ones who actually enforced that ultimate penalty were the executioners. So he refuses to walk into that slaughterhouse wearing a hero's cape. He will step into the abyss as the ultimate nightmare for those inmates, the executioner. Stepping onto the block, he mockingly introduces himself as the new warden, though the mob instantly recognizes his face. Why the hell was a famous hero rocking a guard's uniform? Ultimately, they didn't care. They planned to butcher him all the same. The second the bloodthirsty mob rushes him, he punches a gaping crater straight through the lead thug's chest, blasting the rest away like rag dolls. As the shockwave violently mangles their bodies, he calmly taps the comms system wired into his gear and announces that by direct mandate of the government, every living soul from the ground level to the highest tier, including the darkest depths of basement level 5, will face immediate, undeniable execution. The inmates instantly lose their minds, screaming in outrage at the death sentence. In their twisted heads, this punishment is entirely unfair. Gang Yu coldly reminds them of the mountain of innocent corpses they left behind. Why act so utterly terrified now that the Reaper is knocking? Panic sets in as they furiously backtrack. Khalida screeches that his body count wasn't even that high. He only butchered 12 innocent people. Another psychopath. Brooks violently chopped up 7 victims simply out of sheer boredom. Then there was Keed, a vile predator who committed unspeakable atrocities against the nation's youth. The crowd squeals in terror, desperately begging for legal representation. But a monster named Guan Choi, with 8 murders under his belt, spots a golden opportunity while the new guard is busy listening to the pathetic whining. He attempts to activate his powers for a stealthy escape. He makes his move, but the very split second Gang Yu detects his presence, he literally kicks the guy's head clean off his shoulders. The entire cell block goes dead silent. Gang Yu offers them one incredibly simple choice. Either they snap their power-dampening collars back on, crawl into their cages, and patiently await their deaths, or he can slaughter every last one of them right here, right now. One inmate barks at him to shut the hell up. The second option sounds way better. If they're guaranteed to die regardless, they might as well go down swinging. Right, the logic behind this so-called deal is utterly ridiculous. What kind of delusional guard was this guy? Gang Yu stares him down, pointing out a massive misunderstanding. This wasn't a negotiation. This was the absolute final shred of mercy he was willing to hand out. Murmurs rippled through the crowd as a general consensus starts forming, realizing they should probably just surrender. But right then the loudmouth from before shrieks at the mob to pay attention. Sure, his terrifying strength demands respect, hero or not. But he stands completely alone against a massive mob. There is absolutely no way he survives a unified assault. Hell, Hilson actually slaughtered a Tier 2 hero back in the day, proving that sheer numbers can overwhelm anyone. That bloody track record fuels the inmates with a twisted surge of absolute confidence. The ringleader aggressively rallies the bloodthirsty swarm. He roars at them to stop shaking in their boots over this arrogant bastard. They can easily rip him apart right here and smash their way back into the free world. Gang Yu simply glares at the loudmouth instigator, realizing this has to be the exact mastermind the warden warned him about back in her secure office. Sayun had broken it down perfectly. The inmates inside Rukalus are strictly caged based on their catastrophic threat level. The ground floor violently houses over 300 seasoned murderers, each boasting a massive body count. Meanwhile, the first basement level locks away roughly 100 walking disasters, capable of wiping out entire towns. Descending deeper, the second sublevel contains roughly 30 monsters who could effortlessly reduce massive cities to ash. Plunge to the third floor, and you will find 10 apocalyptic threats who could bring entire The fourth basement traps a mere 5 anomalies beings that pose a lethal danger to the entire continent. And finally, at the darkest depths, the fifth basement holds Huang, alongside 2 other living nightmares who threaten the very existence of the globe. She admitted it was an insanely suicidal mission, but luckily, he wouldn't actually have to fight every single one of them. Why? Because at their rotten core, these lunatics are still chaotic criminals. Whether they fester on the 2nd or 5th floor, they will inevitably tear each other's throats out, either from sheer boredom or sick amusement. But the ground floor is a terrifying exception. Every single savage up there operates as a unified army, blindly following one dictator, Hilson. This freak possesses a rare ability that aggressively amplifies the raw power of anyone standing nearby. Gang Yu coldly brings up Hilson's infamous raid. He stormed a hospital with 30 armed thugs, slaughtering 7 innocent civilians, along with a Tier 2 hero named Hayes, racking up a total of 8 confirmed kills. Hilson smirks sinisterly, correcting him. It was actually 10 victims because that pathetic female hero was carrying twins. Hearing that sickening detail, Gang Yu taps his comms. He calmly warns the warden that he's about to unleash some serious violence, and casually questions if the prison walls can handle the impact. Sayun instantly greenlights the slaughter, guaranteeing the facility won't shatter under any circumstances. With that absolute clearance, Gang Yu drops all restraints. He is not pulling a single punch. Hilson laughs off the threat, utterly convinced the guy is bluffing. After all, Gang Yu was nothing but useless dead weight in his former hero faction equality. The bastard probably only captured Huang by using his teammates as meat shields to steal the final hit. But Hilson tells Gang Yu not to sweat it, because he's about to grant him a one-way ticket to hell, to apologize to them personally. Hilson immediately activates his aura, violently supercharging every convict in the room. The intoxicating surge of raw energy completely fries their brains, and the frenzied mob mindlessly stampedes straight toward Gang Yu. Boom! In a literal fraction of a second, a single devastating shockwave obliterates the majority of the horde. Hilson's arrogant smirk but Gang Yu is just getting started. He violently craters the solid concrete floor, launching the remaining thugs into the air like ragged. The sheer kinetic force makes the entire underground fortress violently quake. Down on the first basement level, a solitary figure feels the massive tremor and quietly wonders if the legendary Gang Yu has actually arrived. Back upstairs, Hilson shrieks in absolute panic, desperately commanding his meat shields to block the advancing reaper. But it is utterly pointless. He is an unstoppable force of nature, tearing through the panicked crowd at imperceptible, blinding speeds. He brutally slices them completely in half before their brains can even process the pain. Shredded bodies rain down onto the blood. Stepping over the carnage, Gang Yu coldly reports that the ground floor has been fully exterminated. his next brutal destination, the solitary confinement block. As he marches downward, he casually tries to calculate his body count. Hundreds, probably. Every single time he confronts a new batch of inmates, he delivers the exact same chilling ultimatum. Strap your suppressors back on, or die on the spot. One of the last foolish idiots who dared to got his skull completely obliterated, joining the mounting pot. Seeing the gore, his terrified buddy instantly threw his hands up, begging to put his collar back on. Unfortunately, the pathetic surrender was just a dirty trick. He sneaked a massive explosive sucker punch right into Gang Yu's face. The villain grinned like a maniac, thrilled that his blast actually connected. But the smoke clears, and Gang Yu doesn't even have a single scratch from that pathetic attack. Strangely, the spark triggers a distant memory. The exact words a captured psycho right after being defeated. The villain viciously mocked anyone lacking physical enhancement powers, claiming those weaklings could never experience the visceral, intoxicating high of crushing a human skull with their bare hands. Yet staring at his blood-stained fists, Gang Yu feels absolutely nothing. Butchering these villains feels no different than casually cracking fragile. It's just way too boring. Eventually, his bloody path leads him to a massive reinforced cell. The shadowy figure inside smirks, chuckling that he totally knew who was causing all that beautiful Man, how long has it been? 3 whole years, right? This creep is Chuck Fielder, a sadistic freak sitting on death row for sickening repeated acts of cannibalism and severely mutilating countless corpses. Chuck casually grins, mocking Gang Yu by saying he's thrilled to see the ex-hero finally scored a brand. But honestly, you look absolutely miserable doing it. Gang Yu completely ignores the taunt, rigidly delivering his life or death ultimatum. He felt it deep in his bones this reunion was pure destiny. He still perfectly recalls the exact moment they dragged him into custody. Does the guy even remember staring at that bubbling pot of mouth-watering stew, practically begging him to take a taste? Let me tell you, nothing hits the spot quite like human flesh. Gang Yu was absolutely furious back then. So enraged, he lunged in but his blonde companion blocked the fatal blow. Chuck clearly remembers how pissed off Gang Yu looked at her interference. He honestly viewed Gang Yu is completely done with this psychopath's rambling, figuring the freak is just begging for death. Chuck smirks, asking if the officer understands his true motive for murder, but Gang Yu couldn't care less. He instantly slices the maniac's head right off. Yet somehow the severed head keeps talking, claiming he slaughters people purely to leave a permanent mark. The very second he snuffs out a life, his face burns into their final thoughts. In that exact fraction of a second, he weaponizes his ability, searing his horrifying image directly into their dead eyes, ensuring total immortality. That is the terrifying nature of his superpower. Pure hallucination. To back up his twisted claim, the creep boasts that he memorized every single victim, threatening to list off their names, one by agonizing one. But the instant he starts his sick roll call, Gang Yu violently severs his hand, flatly stating that this endless talking earned him a one-way ticket to solitary confinement. The guard actually targeted that hideous face, proving the villain's illusionary powers are far less godlike than he arrogantly assumed. Chuck merely cackles, throwing out one final question before fading away. Does the officer recall the endless trail of corpses he left behind just to get here? Gang Yu coldly replies, no, they were nothing but pathetic trash, totally unworthy of space in his brain. Sensing the opening, Chuck unleashes his terrifying gift, manifesting the bleeding ghosts of Gang Yu's fallen comrades, desperately trying to force a traumatic trip down memory lane. Yet facing his dead friend, Gang Yu effortlessly shreds through the phantoms like wet paper, mockingly asking if that cheap trick is his ultimate move. Chuck watches in absolute disbelief, stunned that a man could massacre his own crew without a second thought. But to the brutal officer, those empty mirages hold zero emotional weight. Besides, he left that life behind. He strictly enforces the rules now. Coughing up blood, Chuck croaks out a chilling realization. This guy is no ordinary prison guard. He operates like a cold-blooded monster, sharing the exact same psychotic DNA as Huang, whether he cares to admit it or not. Those haunting final words will definitely leave a permanent scar on Gang Yu. Meanwhile, plunging down to basement level 5, Huang is dying of his female target refuses to throw a single punch, and some invisible barrier keeps blocking his murderous strikes. Completely fed up with this stalemate, he considers ditching this mystery dungeon and fighting his way back to the surface. Watching the chaos unfold, a sharp-dressed man asks Lady Sinka when they should crash the party. But her eyes remain glued to Gong Yu's brutal display, passionately declaring that the fierce officer is destined to be her husband, no matter the cost. Her imposing bodyguard Canis raises an eyebrow, bluntly pointing out that just 5 minutes ago she claimed Huang was her true soulmate. The snarky girl beside them, Gato, totally backs him up. After all, didn't they launch that massive EMP strike specifically to bail Huang out of trouble? Canis chimes in, reminding the group that Gang Yu plays the hero role, making him a Sinka smirks, correcting him he used to be a hero. Watching him slice through people, he sure as hell doesn't look like a savior anymore. Her eccentric crew pressures her to pick a favorite. Since having 2 husbands breaks the law, she finds utterly captivated by both of their dangerously. Whoever survives this bloodbath wins the ultimate prize of becoming her man. Back inside the grim facility, Seo-yoon contacts Gong Yu, praising him for completely neutralizing the ground floor with zero hesitation. She warns that the deeper he plunges, the more violently dangerous the inmates become, strongly advising him to catch his breath. But the relentless guard rejects the offer, determined to press deeper into the abyss immediately. Reluctantly yielding, she drops a heavy personal request. Deep within that concrete hell, faint life signals are still pinging from a handful of trapped correctional officers. She pleads with him to rescue those desperate souls, hoping to safely return them to their weeping families. He sharply demands an exact headcount of survivors. Sadly, Command has no clue, since the brutal riots completely trashed the communication network, except for the feeds on basement level 5. It feels incredibly intentional, like some twisted mastermind is forcing them to broadcast the sickening slaughter down there. The tactical crew locks in, confirming the heavy gates to basement level 1 are primed to open, officially green-lit by the warden herself. Before cutting the feed, she delivers one final desperate warning. He needs to stay on high alert, because these underground freaks are going to hit way harder than the surface trash. The very split second those massive steel doors groan open, 2 hulking brutes completely blindside Gang Yu, while snipers unleash a relentless storm of ranged attacks to guarantee his gruesome death. Watching the monitors, Seo-yoon gasps in absolute panic for her unstoppable ally, but a massive thug creeps up from the shadows, growling that she better start worrying about her own survival right about now. The hulking creep practically drools, utterly shocked that he managed to corner the elusive warden. He sneers, ready to violently wipe that arrogant smirk right off her face. He loudly barks for his crew to come admire his prized catch, but is met with dead silence. Every single one of his goons has been slaughtered. Stepping over the fresh corpse, Gong Yu coldly scolds the warden for lingering near exposed entryways. This entire facility has just become... Right before he heads out, she drops one last warning. Tamaki, the notorious rogue Tome, dragged in, is lurking on the exact floor he is heading toward. Gong Yu, however, is already one step ahead. Down in a grim, solitary confinement block on the first underground level, the rest of the inmates catch the echoing chaos. They start whispering, wondering if someone actually busted out. Tamaki just scoffs, calling them a pack of absolute idiots. A breakout. Not a chance. Nobody packs enough firepower to trigger that kind of earthquake. Even if she ordered them to sit tight, they would definitely ignore her. She is sitting on death row for flatlining 28 heroes. Now as a disgraced former hero throwing shade at the rest of them for sinking to villain status, one inmate absolutely loses it, snapping and asking if she has a death wish. Tamaki just laughs right in his furious face. After all, these guys are only locked up for picking off defenseless civilians. They have probably never landed a single scratch on an actual awakened hero. Yet this scrub actually thinks he can step up to her. Is he completely brain dead? Pushed over the edge, the guy snarls that he will personally end her right here and now, just to see how her blood looks. But Tamaki does not even give him a second to fully mutate. In a blinding flash, she slices him clean in 2, coldly asking if that gave him the thrill he was looking for. Back in her glory days, she hauled in countless rogues, mastering exactly how to tear apart anyone wielding these supernatural gifts. She flipped that exact same combat logic to butcher a whole squad of heroes, too. So they better team up with her right now. She can show them exactly how to hunt these caped crusaders, like stray dogs in an alley. And as a sweet little sign-on bonus, she is willing to leak the classified secrets behind Gang Yu's powers. The remaining inmates, suddenly terrified to cross her, nervously ask how she could possibly know anything about his skills. She smirks, reminding them again that she used to play for the good guys. Naturally, she holds the dirty little secrets of almost every hero out there. One guy hesitates, wondering if that intel even matters. Gang Yu rolled with the Equality Squad, placing him solidly in the legendary Tier 1 ranks, totally out of her league. She was third string at best. Tamaki chuckles, explaining that the second Ryosa took the reins of that elite faction, she ripped up the entire hero rulebook. Her very first move was completely redefining the code of justice, strictly forbidding anyone from legally executing villains, 0 exceptions allowed. She also rolled out a brutal mass training boot camp for the rookies. But the ultimate bombshell, she completely shattered the old power ranking system that used to divide them. These criminals might be scratching their heads wondering why she is giving them a boring history lesson. Well, that tier system was permanently scrapped way before Gang Yu ever signed his name to the roster. His recruitment totally flew under the radar, mainly because his track record was absolute garbage. Naturally, the rumor mill went into overdrive. Whispers claimed he had heavy-hitting political backing, while others swore he was secretly sleeping with Ryosa. The inmate nods, admitting the math does not add up. He has never actually witnessed Gang Yu throw a punch. Still, the guy just scrubbed the entire ground floor off the map in mere seconds, proving he operates at a Tier 2 level minimum. Going toe-to-toe with a monster like that is pure suicide right now. Tamaki rolls her eyes, telling him to stop shaking in his boots. That upper level was packed with nothing but bottom-feeding trash. Hell, any heavy hitter in this very cell block dragging thousands of bodies on their record could have swept that floor clean. That includes Speech, who personally snuffed out 6,435 lives. She is not claiming Gang Yu is a pushover, not even close. But she has his fatal flaw completely figured out, which makes her dead certain they can corner and crush him without breaking a sweat. Speech narrows his eyes, questioning if her supposed golden intel is actually a legitimate blind spot. Tamaki snaps at them to quit dragging their feet. They are totally out of options anyway. They either back her play right now or get butchered by him one-on-one. Reading the grim writing on the wall, the majority of the pack falls in line. Even Speech grunts his approval, though he is clearly swallowing down his doubts. Supernatural gifts first flared up in humanity several centuries back. As the generations dragged on, obsessive researchers decoded the genetic chaos dividing these miracles into 3 ironclad classes. Category 1, the physical type abilities. These traits aggressively mutate and reinforce the user's flesh and bone. Category 2, the creation type superpowers. This gives individuals the godlike power to pull solid matter straight out of thin air. And finally, Category 3, the special type abilities. These are the wildly unpredictable powers that completely defy the logic of the first 2 groups. Now every single convict stands ominously at the edge of their cages, as Gang Yu's heavy footsteps approach. In the shadows, Speech fires up his telepathic frequencies, hardwiring every villain's brain into a massive silent network. This psychic link gives them a terrifying 360-degree view of Gang Yu. Watching him, Tamaki remains fiercely convinced he is a physical brawler, just like her. And she is absolutely positive she holds the key to breaking him. She actually witnessed his training sessions back when she wore a cape. The guy was sparring with a heavily armed mech, which instantly unleashed a devastating laser barrage right at his face. Cutting back to reality, Gang Yu delivers a chilling ultimatum, but that is exactly when a massive shockwave slams into his chest, and he just takes it. That right there is his ultimate fatal flaw. The man absolutely refuses to sidestep any incoming strike. Knowing this exact weakness, Tomoki cleverly positioned inmates, armed with creation and special type powers, in the back rows, raining down a relentless crossfire upon him. She fully understood why he tanked those heavy hits. He simply did not feel the need to move. And that supreme arrogance was exactly why she slipped a nasty little surprise into that deadly ambush, as dozens of power-dampening restraints suddenly snap around Gang Yu's limbs, locking him down tight. Hours before this bloodbath even kicked off, she ordered her crew to strip the dead warden and scavenge their suppression cuffs. However, Speech openly doubted if basement-level gear could even put a dent in this absolute monster. She confidently brushed off his concerns, explaining that sheer volume would easily do the trick. 10 collars would permanently ground a second-tier threat, and 15 could cage a first-tier. Not that she actually believed he was that strong. She then commanded Million, whose power guarantees a perfect, to prep the payload. Just to be absolutely certain of their victory, she ordered him to slap 30 of those dampeners onto the intruder. That would definitely break him. The surrounding convicts erupted into triumphant cheers. But their victorious grins rapidly morphed into pure terror as the glaring cracks in Tomoki's brilliant scheme shattered wide open. Flaw number 1. Gang Yu operates on a monstrous level, entirely beyond your standard top-ranking heroes. Panic instantly sets in as speech confirms the absolute worst the monster just casually, leaving Tomoki utterly paralyzed in disbelief. Meanwhile, the terrified inmates desperately scream at her for orders, begging to know if they should trigger the backup plan. Snapping back to her senses, she barks at the squad to initiate Phase 2. They viciously grab the surviving guards, shoving guns against their heads, and violently threaten the intruder to back them, or these innocent hostages get their brains blown out. But the exact moment those demands leave their lips, her second catastrophic miscalculation rears its ugly head. She genuinely assumed Gang Yu was nothing more than a physical brawler. The surrounding inmates instantly drop dead, writhing in agonizing pain, completely blindsided because nobody warned them about his terrifying supernatural arsenal. As the remaining survivors frantically crawl out of their cells, throwing their hands up in absolute surrender, the third and most, she actually believed she could somehow outsmart an apex predator who completely outclassed her in literally every conceivable category. In the blink of an eye, Speech finds his telepathic link brutally severed, with absolutely zero ally, and completely loses his mind, shrieking at Tomoki. Their entire squad just got butchered. How the hell are they supposed to survive this? He keeps aggressively tearing into her, begging for a command, while she just stands there frozen, desperately trying to salvage this bloodbath. He spits that this entire massacre is his own damn fault for trusting a washed-up ex-hero. Hearing enough of his relentless whining, Tomoki finally snaps, and driven by pure, unadulterated rage, she brutally plunges a blade into him, over and over, screaming at the top of her lungs for him to shut the hell. Panting heavily, she frantically tries to wrap her head around how he obliterated those heavy-duty dampeners. Could his raw strength truly be that godlike? Just then, from the corner of her eye, she spots a lone, trembling warden trapped in the room, and desperately craving a punching bag to vent her boiling frustration. She viciously lunges forward to shred the poor guy with her sharp claws. But before she can even blink, Gang Yu cleanly severs her entire hand. Staring down at her, he coldly demands her final words before the execution. But slumping in defeat, she simply mutters that she is completely screwed. When he deadpans if that is really her dying speech, she ignores him, asking if that all the righteous heroes from equality are wiped out. Gang Yu gives a cold nod, cementing the brutal truth: Tome is dead. Shock paralyzes her features entirely, unable to She had explicitly warned the kid against joining the dangerous hero business, but her naive little sister stubbornly ignored the advice. Confusion completely overtakes her as she questions why a so-called equality member is butchering people left and right. Do his righteous comrades even know what a Ryosa desperately bled to reform this corrupt industry, yet this psychotic massacre just trashed her entire legacy. She must be looking down on him with absolute disgust right now. Not a single muscle twitches on Gang Yu's stoic face, as he simply asks if she is finally done yapping. Flashing back to when Tomoki first stepped into the dazzling hero scene, her very first realization was that this entire grand system was sickeningly rotten to its core. The mere excuse of combating evil practically handed these caped crusaders a legal license to effortlessly slaughter villains on the toss in absolute immunity for any tragic civilian casualties, and it became crystal clear. Heroes were untouchable gods hovering high above the law. She exclusively adopted the hero moniker Bliss for one reason alone. Her bright-eyed sister Tome completely worshipped the ground she walked on. But unlike Tomoki, Tome possessed absolutely zero superpowers back then, heavily relying on her older sister to constantly bail her out. Truth be told, society did not break Tomoki, nor did it tragically mold her into this psychotic villain. The woman was fundamentally unhinged straight from the start. Sure, her literal job description was rescuing the helpless, but she never lifted a single finger out of the goodness of her heart, or some noble desire for world peace. She did it entirely to feed her massive god complex, thriving on feeling vastly superior to the pathetic masses. Until one fateful mission, where she was violently forced to execute a villain. Taking her first life didn't bring guilt, It sent pure, intoxicating euphoria coursing through her veins. It delivered a twisted, adrenaline-fueled high that blew any narcotic drunk on that sickening sense of absolute godhood. The floodgates blew wide open. She went on a complete rampage, slaughtering anyone unlucky enough to cross her path. Scumbag villains, innocent bystanders, or righteous heroes, it didn't matter. But her absolute favorite targets, the pathetic, fragile colleagues, who couldn't hold a candle to her strength. Oh, the absolute bliss of watching their eyes widen, drinking in that delicious cocktail of utter betrayal and paralyzing terror as they hit the dirt. And then came the pathetic, weeping pleas for mercy. But her bloody joyride was about to hit a brick wall. Tomei finally started putting the puzzle pieces together, finding it highly suspicious that Tamaki kept showing up severely late to every single, not to mention that inescapable metallic stench of fresh blood clinging to her clothes. Deciding to tail her sister into the shadows, Tomei finally witnessed the horrifying, gruesome truth first. Getting caught red-handed didn't even make Tamaki blink. With a twisted grin, she eagerly invited her sibling to join the slaughterfest. But she made one thing perfectly clear. If Tomei refused, the merciless killing spree would just keep rolling. That exact moment triggered Tomei's hidden abilities, allowing her to violently chain her deranged sister down for the very first time. From that grim night onward, putting a permanent end to Tamaki's madness became the sole driving obsession. She legally secured her pro license, specifically transforming herself into a relentless bloodhound hell-bent on hunting down her own. Eventually, she cornered her prey and slapped the cuffs on. Yet Tamaki didn't shed a single tear of regret. Instead, she simply pouted maliciously, pitying the fact that Tomei lacked a physical brawler quirk, meaning she would never get to experience the wet, sickening crunch of caving in a human skull, using nothing but her own bare hands. Oh, the sheer, unadulterated dopamine rush she was missing out on. Tomei slammed her straight into maximum security. Now staring down Gong Yu, Tamaki demands to know how her sister actually kicked the bucket. Was it a peaceful exit at least? Gong Yu racks his brain, the grim memory finally clicking into place. Tomei had suffered an agonizingly brutal end, desperately screaming for Tamaki to come save her in her final, painful moments. But story time is officially over. Ready to spill blood, she furiously launches herself right at Gong Yu's throat, only to brutally shatter a perfectly crafted decoy. The real Gong Yu materializes silently at her blind spot, viciously planting a devastating roundhouse kick straight into her spine before she can even But the psychotic villain absolutely refuses to stay down. She violently erupts from the massive crater of debris, screaming for a counterattack. Gong Yu coldly intercepts her, burying a ruthless hook extremely deep into her stomach, instantly forcing her entire body to A fleeting shadow of guilt crosses his mind. Executing the sole family member of a former comrade leaves a bitter taste, even if she is a merciless death row inmate. But reading his lethal intent, the once arrogant murderer instantly shatters, pathetically crying and pleading for mercy. She desperately reminds him of his sacred vow to Ryosa, the ironclad. Looking down with dead, emotionless eyes, Gang Yu casually drops the truth that hero died a long time ago. Yet she just keeps weeping loudly. He softly points out the beautiful irony. Right now she looks exactly like the countless innocent souls who desperately prayed for her mercy, the exact same cries she coldly ignored. Or maybe she never even bothered to listen at all. And with one final deafening crack, the twisted saga of Tamaki the hero who plummeted into total darkness is permanently snuffed out. The explosive shockwaves from Gang Yu's absolute demolition violently rattle the entire underground fortress. For one twisted listener, the rumbling sparks a sickeningly deep and for a certain someone else it just builds the mouth-watering anticipation. Sick and tired of twiddling his thumbs, Huang decides to crash the party and hunt Gong Yu down right now. But the exact second those words leave his mouth, a massive invisible force brutally launches him straight through solid concrete. The culprit, peeling himself off the rubble, Huang smirks, admitting the old geezer actually packs a terrifying punch. Kingston merely chuckles humbly, claiming his fragile. But don't let the wrinkles fool you. This ancient titan is literally the very first monster ever banished to the 5th basement floor hell, the inaugural inmate of the entire facility. Up in the control room, the warden gets the juicy alert that these two absolute juggernauts have crossed paths. She leans back with a wicked grin, knowing damn well this collision guarantees a fresh corpse. And if she had to put money on it, she's heavily backing Kingston to take, though she genuinely questions why he's randomly levitating that terrified woman mid-air. Down below, Huang brushes off the idea of scrapping with a senior citizen. But Kingston is absolutely itching to rip him apart. As the absolute pioneer of this hellhole, he holds the unbroken record for the longest-serving resident, comfortably chilling on death row for decades, and standing out bizarrely from the rest of the basement freaks who literally wiped out entire cities to earn their cells. Kingston's lifetime body count: just 3 single souls. But his very first victim and the remaining 2 chalk outlines, Clark and Halo, the absolute pinnacle of top-tier god-level heroes, reigning during that exact same era. This shadowy boogeyman essentially spawned out of thin air, effortlessly flatlining the 3 most ungodly powerful entities walking the earth. Society blindly worshipped that trio as utterly invincible gods. So logically, effortlessly, burying them automatically crowned Kingston as But the aftermath. Talk about a massive letdown. Despite cementing himself as an apocalyptic world-ending threat, the madman just casually surrendered to He willingly locked himself inside a cage, perfectly exploiting the massive political friction brewing between the corrupt government and the fractured hero association. And brilliantly playing the system, he's somehow managed to dodge the executioner's needle for 30 straight years. Smirking, the ancient titan firmly promises all the old monster really craves is a violently entertaining sparring match to cure his boredom. With a heavy sigh, Huang begrudgingly accepts the challenge. He compresses the gory mess into dense flesh projectiles, hurling them straight at Kingston. But the old man simply weaves his hands, deflecting the barrage of meat. He pulverizes the rest with sheer force, unleashing Initially, Huang assumed the old-timer was just another telekinetic freak. But that seamless blend of fierce offense and suddenly, Huang groans, complaining that he is bored out of his skull. The thrill is completely gone. Why waste energy slaughtering a geezer who already has 1 foot in the grave? Kingston smirks at the kid's staggering arrogance. He has crossed paths with countless punks just like him, big fishes suffocating in tiny ponds. And usually, their massive egos dig their own graves. Kingston takes a single step forward, and the entire facility quakes violently. A panicked guard shrieks, convinced the ceiling is about to cave in. The warden sharply shuts him down. He proudly claims the penitentiary boasts 20 layers of reinforced power-dampening barricades. It is absolutely indestructible. Meanwhile, Kingston decides it is high time to school this disrespectful brat. A brutal lesson in humility is on the menu. In a flash, the elder launches himself, delivering a devastating flying kick that completely obliterates the supposedly unbreakable barrier. The massive shockwave rattles everyone's bones. Dusting himself off, the warden stumbles up, desperately demanding to know who survived But the terrified guard stammers out a much grimmer reality. That single legendary strike shattered the containment walls to dust. Even Huang stands paralyzed in pure shock, stunned that a fossil could pack such apocalyptic firepower. Right then, a smooth voice echoes from the shadows, mocking him for chasing after a grandpa. A mysterious silhouette steps into the light. It is Shinka. She casually invites him over for a little chat. Huang's playful demeanor instantly vanishes as he demands her identity. Her conditions: sit down, shut up, and listen. Up in the control room, the warden is losing his mind. How on earth did a random woman infiltrate the level 5 basement? Shinka smiles, ready to spill her secrets. But no uninvited guests allowed. With a flick of her wrist, she completely blacks out the surveillance feed, leaving the warden screaming in absolute fury. Cut to Gong Yu touching down at the level 2 basement gate. He taps his earpiece for clearance but is met with dead static. The signal is totally jammed. Done playing nice, he grips the massive steel doors and forcefully rips them wide open. As he slowly descends the darkened staircase to level 2, something immediately feels off. The suffocating metallic stench of fresh blood that soaked it is unnervingly quiet. The corridors are completely deserted, not a single mangled corpse in sight, and the floors are spotless. Suddenly, a frantic sprint breaks the silence. He spots a woman running for her life, chased by 2 gigantic nightmarish wolves straight out of a horror movie. Her eyes lock onto his relief washing over her face as she mistakes him for Gong Ho. But disaster strikes. She stumbles hard, giving the bloodthirsty beasts the perfect opening. Without missing a beat, Gong Yu effortlessly slaughters the monsters and checks on her. Instead of answering, she throws her arms around. Why the hell is he up here? And since when did he possess superhuman abilities? Gently peeling her off, Gong Yu drops the bomb. He isn't Gong Ho. He is his twin brother. Her jaw drops. She knows he is a famous hero, but that still does not explain the ominous uniform or his sudden appearance in a hellhole. Ignoring her questions, Gong Yu warns her that the danger is far from over. He urges her to escape upward through the cleared paths. Flustered, she deeply apologizes, awkwardly calling him her brother-in-law. She blushes, admitting how crazy that must sound since they haven't even properly met yet, so she formally clears the air. She is engaged to his brother, officially making her his future sister-in-law. And honestly, she cannot get over how terrifyingly Meanwhile, deep inside the solitary confinement wing of that Miel whispers a chilling warning to Mael. A little rat has snuck into their domain. He mockingly wonders just how heavy the intruder's sins truly are. Mael's eyes darken as she coldly states that the trespasser butchered one of her. That is all Miel needs to hear. The verdict is in. The intruder is taking a one-way trip to hell. Back in the corridor, the rescued woman reveals her name is Hong Jia. She warmly mentions that she had only ever caught glimpses of him through pixelated videos, but standing face to face, he radiates a much kinder aura. Gong Yu offers a soft smile, admitting that his brother. However, the whole marriage part was definitely left out. Jia chuckles, nervously confessing that they completely rushed the engagement after discovering she was expecting a baby. Right now, his future niece or nephew is growing inside her belly. Gong Yu freezes, utterly paralyzed by this massive revelation. She gently rubs her stomach, explaining she is barely 1 month along. The two of them had just found out a few days prior. Gang Ho had desperately wanted to surprise his brother with the good news, right after he finally took down Huang. Instantly, a soul-crushing wave of grief. His heart shatters. How can he possibly look this expecting mother in the eye and tell her the horrifying truth? Oblivious, swallowing his pain, he coldly explains his dark mission. He was officially hired to slaughter every single inmate locked inside. Jia gasps, visibly horrified. Did the psychotic warden blackmail him into doing this dirty work? Looking into her innocent eyes, Gong Yu realizes Gong Yu brings her up to speed on the devastating EMP blast. With the culprit still a total mystery, her immediate focus shifts, demanding to know what in the world happened to Gong Ho. Knowing the guy was trapped way down on sub-level 5, Gong Yu wrestles with the brutal truth. But considering the absolute nightmare unfolding around them, he bites his tongue and feeds her a lie, claiming that his brother is still actively broadcasting SOS signals. A huge wave of relief washes over her face. Gong Yu immediately orders her to head topside, stressing that this place is a total death trap. But she digs her heels in, determined to. She insists she can clear his path to the lower levels. How? Through her psychometry, a rare psychic gift that lets her physically dive into people's deepest memories. Obviously, she would never pry into his mind without a damn good reason. But she has tapped into this power before to dig up dirt on the prisoners, verifying if those scumbags actually committed their crimes. Skeptical Gang Yu demands to know how mind reading is supposed to keep them alive right now. She drops a bombshell. This entire sector has been completely hijacked by Mail and Mile. Those notoriously twisted inmates, straight out of maximum security isolation. These freaky siblings wield a terrifying special grade summoning ability. They literally conjure up monstrous entities that plunge blades right through their victims' hearts. Once impaled, the poor souls are essentially transformed into mindless meat puppets. And right now, every single convict on this block is dancing on their strings. Gong Yu does not even blink. He already pieced that together, knowing full well those two are Mago's fanatics. Her intel is useless to him, so he orders her to bounce immediately. But she fiercely shuts him down again, pointing out a massive complication. Some of these brainwashed pawns swarming the area are actually fellow prison guards. To his eyes, they are all just a sea of zombified enemies, practically impossible to tell apart from the actual crooks. But with her psychic radar, she can effortlessly sift through their memories and pick out the innocent ones. Gang Yu narrows his eyes, questioning if those manipulated guards are not already dead meat anyway. She frantically swears that they are still breathing. If they can just snap the mind control link, those officers will snap right back to normal. Gang Yu coldly points out that she is dealing with psychopathic killers. They are not just going to sit down and negotiate. Yet this ridiculously naive woman clings to the delusion that she can somehow talk them down as a desperate last resort. Frustrated, Gang Yu snaps at her to think about her but she fiercely holds her ground. Pregnant or not, she wears a badge. She is a corrections officer, sworn to protect and serve, and she refuses to turn. That stubborn sense of justice hits dangerously close to home. It sounds exactly like his brother. Reluctantly giving in, forging an impenetrable shield to keep her safe. Shivering, she just prays this creepy, suffocating aura will not harm her baby. They soon stumble upon a squad of brainwashed grunts, clearly stitched together by Mail's twisted magic. Hong urgently whispers that Mei, the older, more dangerous twin, dragged most of the guards away, warning him to stay frosty. Ignoring the trivia, Gang Yu coldly asks her to pinpoint the innocent officers in the crowd. Firing up her psychic radar, she sweeps their minds. Only two, she confirms, pointing at a couple of dazed figures lagging in the very back. She starts rattling off a tactical non-lethal approach, but Gang Yu completely shuts her out. He cranks up his dark aura, completely blinding her vision, deciding there is a much faster, brutally simple way to filter out the good. He instantly secures the two guards in shadowy restraints, then unleashes absolute hell. After all, he is an executioner, and this is exactly what he was unleashed to do. While he effortlessly mows them down, the freaky twins are watching his rampage through a mystic. Mile nervously chews her lip, wondering if this monster is actually stronger than their own master. Mail shrugs, completely clueless, prompting his sister to ask if he could rival that woman. Trembling, she huddles close to her brother, confessing that she is genuinely terrified. But Mail arrogantly scoffs, telling her to brush off. He confidently smirks, convinced that no mere guard could ever easily put them in the dirt. Meanwhile, back in the blood, Gang Yu finally drops the blackout veil. Seeing the absolute carnage, Hong gasps, demanding to know why he resorted to a straight-up bloodbath. He offers a dry apology, admitting he probably should have, but he simply did his sworn duty as a corrections officer, executing death row inmates on the spot. Mind completely blown, she stammers, asking how that is even legal, when the official execution chambers are way down on sub-level 5. Unfazed, he coldly states he just carried out the sentences manually. Horrified, she demands to know whose twisted idea it was to authorize summary executions. Without missing a beat, Gang Yu owns up to it. Refusing to buy it, Hong asks if the warden seriously greenlit this massacre. When he nods yes, her face contorts in disgust, wondering what the hell that crazy old hag. Pushing further, she asks how he can sleep at night after butchering people like that. Gang Yu does not flinch. He is a corrections officer. Taking out the trash is literally in his job description. Hong fiercely rejects that twisted logic. She passionately fires back that prison guards are not executioners hired to rack up. Their true purpose is to rehabilitate these broken people. That is the oath they swore. But Gang Yu could not care less about her bleeding heart philosophy. He is totally sick of being lectured about pretty ideals, especially from someone so dangerously naive. Society might preach that true heroes save villains instead of putting them down. But he has learned the hard way. He knows exactly what happens when you chase nothing but blind, empty justice. Eventually you end up getting completely slaughtered by a rabid monster who could not care less about reason or mercy. And to be brutally honest, he does not give a flying fuck about being called a hero anymore. If anything, he regrets not cracking skulls like this a long time ago. Someone has to do the dirty work, and he is more than happy to get his hands bloody. Desperate to pull him back from the edge, Hong pleads with him, screaming that these inmates are still breathing, feeling human beings. Gang Yu just glares at her like she has lost her mind. Is she seriously still holding on to that fairy tale? Does she even hear? He steps closer, his voice dropping to a terrifying chill. Take a good. Every single inmate locked away in sub-level 2 and below slaughtered thousands of innocent people. They completely deserve to die, whether it is quick or agonizing. Sure, he remembers the old debates about banning the death penalty, claiming it was just too cruel and barbaric. But false convictions are a thing of the past. Ever since psychics stepped into the picture, the authorities know exactly who dropped the bodies and why. He tells her she really needs to wake up and see the reality of her job. Still drowning in her own delusions, she insists these inmates have tragic backstories, especially the two targets they are hunting. But Gang Yu coldly snaps back that everyone has a sob story, including the countless victims they butchered. It changes absolutely nothing. Their fate is already sealed, whether he snaps their necks right now or the executioner does it later. She desperately argues that no single person should play God. Gang Yu is completely out of patience and orders her to shut her mouth. One more word of that nonsense, and he will forcefully drag her back upstairs so he can clean up this mess his own way. That finally silences her. Eventually, they step into a dim corridor swarming with shadowy guards. He asks for a head count, and Hong whispers that 3 officers are hiding in the back. Just before he launches his assault, she mutters that Gang Ho will be heartbroken when he sees the bloodbath he caused. That completely shatters Gang Yu's last ounce of restraint. Blinded by pure fury, he stands his ground and just tanks a brutal incoming strike. All of this pathetic, idealistic preaching is driving him insane. It is just endless, useless chatter from people who have no idea what it actually takes to survive this hell. Yet even in this blinding rage, Gang Yu manages to cool his nerves by brutally slaughtering the 5 guards standing in his way. Watching from the shadows, Sinka smirks, noting how much more terrifying and badass he gets the deeper they plunge. Gang Yu and Hong push forward until they stumble upon another patrol. Hong quickly points out the enemy positions, and he prepares to blitz them. Suddenly, Miel and Miles step out of the shadows, warmly welcoming him to their floor. He smirks, actually relieved that they saved him the massive headache of hunting them down. The creepy twins glance at Hong, asking why she refused to join. They promise her a ticket to paradise, but Gang Yu cuts them off, demanding they drop the mind control they have over the prison block. If they comply, he promises their deaths will be entirely painless. Miel nervously asks if they can just walk away alive, but Gang Yu coldly lays down the law. The thugs on the upper levels had the luxury of choosing between locking themselves back in or dying. But every single piece of trash trapped down in sub-level 2 and below has massacred thousands without batting an eye. Their only option is a grave. Miel nervously mentions hearing rumor that he used to run with their former master and the woman who locked them up, noting that Gang Yu is a completely different kind of animal. Miles spits that he is definitely rotting in hell for this, but Gang Yu just chuckles, wondering which one of them is going to hit the flames first. Desperate, Miel offers to free the brainwashed guards if they just let them walk away. Gang Yu violently shuts the deal down. Hong begs the twins to stop making things worse and just put their restraining devices back on. But Miel stubbornly argues that they did absolutely nothing to earn a death sentence. He insists she knows they are innocent, using that excuse to refuse the collars. Gang Yu coldly reminds her that wild beasts cannot be reasoned with, no matter how much she preaches. But there is one universal language they always understand: pure, unfiltered agony. Oh, they definitely understand pain. Miel backpedals, claiming he has zero desire to fight. He begs Gang Yu to just hear their tragic backstory, convinced it will force a negotiation. Gang Yu rejects the offer and instantly traps Hong inside his energy field, entirely sick of her endless, idealistic whining. He snatches up the siblings by their collars, whispering that a psychopath once taught him the perfect way to torture a human body. He smiles, saying he never thought those twisted lessons would be so useful. Terrified, Miel screams that there is no reasoning with him, calling him the real beast in this hellhole. Miel corrects him, trembling, as she calls him a total monster. In a flash of panic, the twins suddenly warp across with a group of brainwashed inmates. They mock Gang Yu from a distance, bragging about their elite spatial abilities. It is incredibly annoying, but Gang Yu just scoffs, wondering why these actual demons have the nerve to call him a monster, right as he casually slaughters the wave of guards rushing at him. He mutters that the hypocrisy is pretty disturbing. Miel watches the bloodbath through a crystal orb, while Miel frantically slashes at the solid wall beside them to create an escape route. She promises to buy him as much time as humanly possible. Slamming her hands down, she summons a massive, glowing circle that unleashes a horde of nightmarish, demonic beasts directly into Gang Yu's path. Honestly, he is just relieved to finally butcher something that is not human for a change, and he effortlessly shreds through the monsters like a hot knife through butter. Seeing him close the distance in seconds, Miel panics and asks Miel how much longer the wall will take. He screams that he needs 10 more minutes to break through, forcing her to bite down hard on her thumb, desperately trying to summon another monster. But before the blood even hits the floor, Gang Yu violently explodes through the heavy door. He figured it out pretty fast, cut off the head of the snake, and the rest of the mob will drop. There is absolutely 0 point in fighting the endless swarms when the targets are right here. So this is their absolute final warning. Let the hostages go and earn a quick, painless exit, or suffer a slow, agonizing execution. He demands they drop their abilities one last time. But Miel arrogantly conjures twisted counterfeit archangels, Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, and even Uriel. These phantoms don't last a second though. Gang Yu obliterates them in a single devastating strike. Panicking, Miel snatches up a few officers as human shields, screaming at him to back off. Or is he perfectly fine with butchering the hostages too? Gangyu stares him down, coldly warning that if those men aren't freed, his sister will endure unimaginable torment. He tightens his grip, ripping a blood-curdling shriek from her throat. At the sickening snap of her fragile bones, Miel finally breaks, desperately promising to deactivate his magic. But he begs to talk to Hong first. Gangyu isn't having it. He demands the magic vanishes right this second, or the crushing pressure continues. Defeated, Miel complies. The invisible chains shatter, instantly freeing every single captive, including the rogue inmates who are immediately sliced clean in two. A bewildered officer stammers out a question, but Gangyu just barks at them to evacuate upstairs immediately. Trembling Miel pleads for him to honor their bargain. Gangyu casually nods but insists they relocate for the finale. He refuses to force an expecting mother to witness a brutal bloodbath. Once the coast is clear, she is finally allowed to open her eyes. Gangyu softly assures her that the nightmare is finished. The innocent civilians are completely free from the spell's suffocating grip. He mentions the two culprits begged for a final word with her before they bite the dust. Shaken, she suggests slapping suppression collars on them and letting the law handle it. But Gangyu's patience is totally gone. These monsters slaughtered thousands of innocent souls, and he is going to put them in the ground. Facing his impending doom, Miel hysterically argues that their crimes don't actually warrant an execution. He begs Hong to intervene. She desperately searches for the right words, but the sheer scale of their atrocities leaves her totally speechless. She cannot defend them, proving that Gangyu's ruthless logic is completely justified. And since the hunter upheld his end of the executioner has arrived. Miel spirals into a hyperventilating panic, shrieking in pure terror. But no amount of wailing will block the heavy hand of retribution. But Mago miraculously steps in, throwing up a glowing, impenetrable shield to block the fatal strike. Utterly confused by the sudden interference, Gangyu pauses, questioning if this defensive magic is just another trick hidden up the twins' sleeves. Yet his instincts tell him a lowly thug couldn't possibly conjure magic this pure. Mago is definitely the one pulling the strings. But why in the world would he waste a powerful shield on absolute scumbags? What could possibly be his end? He violently shakes off the confusion. It doesn't matter. Absolutely no wall is thick enough to save these He shatters the shield with explosive force, only for Mago to instantly spawn another. He cracks that one too, but they just relentlessly multiply. Gangyu ruthlessly rips through layer after layer, yet a creeping dread sinks deep into his chest. Suddenly, his mind flashes back to a peaceful afternoon at a local park. Mago was warmly laughing and playing with a bunch of energetic children. A little boy excitedly marveled at his endless stamina, while a little girl cheered about how awesome he was. The little boy enthusiastically promised Tomai that they were definitely going to start a huge family once they tied the knot. Tomai, however, brutally shot him down. Sassily declaring, chuckling, Mago eagerly waved his friends over to join the fun. They happily obliged, while Gangyu chose to isolate himself in the cool shade of a giant oak tree. Eventually, Mago strolled over curiously, asking if the fierce warrior simply couldn't stand kids. Gangyu, he just had absolutely zero clue how to talk to them. Mago casually suggested mimicking how his own parents raised him, prompting Gangyu to drop a heavy truth bomb right after he took his first breath. His older brother was the only true family he had ever known. Realizing he just stepped on a massive emotional landmine, Mago visibly winced and awkwardly muttered. Following a painfully heavy pause, Mago playfully offered to let Gangyu practice his parenting skills on him. Basically act like a totally spoiled toddler. A blatant joke to lighten. Yet beneath the cheesy humor lay a genuine promise. Whenever the crushing weight of the world felt too heavy, Gangyu always had a solid shoulder to lean on. That fleeting memory dragged Gangyu straight back into his darkest nightmares. A blood-soaked hellscape where his entire squad was massacred, leaving him as the sole broken survivor at the bitter end. Back then, Mago's warm, brotherly reassurance had acted as a lifeline. That lingering echo of kindness completely froze Gangyu's fist, just as he prepared to smash the final glowing shield. He abruptly halts his rampage. Ripping Hong out of her protective sphere, he urgently asks if her psychic talents let her read the history imbued in magical spells. She quickly nods, so he gives an order. Scan the barrier right now. As she intensely channels her focus, a deeply hidden memory of Mago surfaces, leaving Gangyu with a terribly bitter taste in his mouth. But strangely, the twisted pasts of the two killers are tangled right alongside his. Hong quickly explains that since the protective spell was directly projected onto the criminals, Mago had accidentally leaked their tragic history into the magic. Gong Yu coldly states that a sad backstory will not magically earn them a pardon. He is going to sever their heads, regardless of what he sees. Bracing himself, Hong fully opens the floodgates to their minds. He is instantly plunged into a grimy underground auction block, reeking of profound misery and filthy humor. Standing terrified on the stage were a 6-year-old Meal and Mile, about to be auctioned off, like mere cattle, into a life of brutal slavery. Deep beneath the ruins of a crumbled city lies the black market ability auction, a twisted playground where elite VIPs hoard rare human powers like trading cards. Right on that auction block stood Miel and Male, two siblings ruthlessly sold off by their own flesh. In this filthy underworld trade, unique powers fetched astronomical prices. Bidders relentlessly fought over those wielding physical. On the flip side, summoning abilities were practically a dime a dozen. That made the siblings incredibly cheap, but their low price tag was nothing but a brilliant disguise. They fiercely guarded the true terrifying nature of their unique powers. Because of this, they rotted away in a pitch-black cell for an agonizingly long time. Just as the hammer was about to drop on them, as a mysterious woman stepped out of the shadows, slamming down a bid because their hidden potential caught her deadly curiosity. The auctioneer scoffed, questioning why she would waste cash on such useless merchandise. He warned her point blank once the money was handed over, she wasn't getting a single dime back. With a chilling grin, the woman revealed her twisted obsession. She desperately wanted to witness the chaotic fusion of an angel and a demon. Miel and Miel stared back blankly, completely lost. The woman didn't expect them to grasp her sick vision, but they were about to learn the hard way. Without warning, a colossal explosion ripped through the underground, swallowing the entire facility in blinding destruction. Yet amidst the roaring flames, they stood completely untouched. A familiar glowing emerald barrier had been cast over the siblings, shielding them from the devastating blast. Stepping through the thick smoke was the mastermind behind the chaos. Beside him stood Lepus, his bizarrely dressed assistant, glaring daggers at him. She snapped, asking if turning people to ash was his twisted idea of a lesson. Mago just let out a hearty laugh. He promised that if she gritted her teeth and trained hard, she would be orchestrating spectacular fireworks like this too. He then reminded her of the golden rule for a summoner: a razor-sharp imagination is the absolute ultimate weapon. Brushing off the carnage, he checked on her mission. She confirmed it was done. Every filthy buyer was dragged away in chains, while the innocent captives were finally set free. Mago cheerfully suggested moving on to their next lesson. But Lepus crossed her arms, seriously doubting that calling down apocalyptic meteors counted as proper education. Right then, a small voice pierced the banter. Miel tugged on their clothes, begging to tag along, proudly declaring that they were summoners too, just like Mago. Lepus immediately shot them down, reminding her boss of his strict promise to only take on a single apprentice. But the old man played dumb. Claiming total memory loss, he leaned in, challenging the kids to show him exactly what they could do. Miel and Male unleashed their powers. The air crackled as a pure angel and a menacing demon materialized right before their eyes. Lepus was completely speechless. Most kids conjured up stuffed animals or silly toys, but this was dark, heavy, and absolutely unheard of. Mago's eyes lit up with pure fascination. Struck by their raw potential, he took the siblings under his wing. For 3 grueling years, Mago forged them into master summoners, refining their chaotic abilities. He constantly drilled one absolute truth into their heads: imagination dictates immense power. Whatever crystal clear image they burned into their minds would violently tear its way into reality. Miel's glowing angels were born from his pure heart, a beautiful reflection of their fiercely protective mother, who shielded them from harm since they were babies. Meanwhile, Male's blood-curdling demons crawled straight out of her darkest trauma, raw manifestations of their violently unhinged father. Mago pushed them to break their mental chains. If they expanded their worldview, the sheer massive scale of their summons would be limitless. But he also assured them that deep obsession wasn't a flaw. After all, Lepus was fanatically fixated on nothing but meteors, and it worked out perfectly for her. Staring into the horizon, Mago asked them what path they wanted to carve out. Without skipping a beat, Mael declared their absolute obsession. Heaven, their mother's dying words were forever burned into their souls. The kind-hearted ascend to paradise, while the wicked plummet into the abyss. Through every beating, through every freezing night in a cave, now they craved absolute justice. They vowed to forge a perfect world where the righteous are crowned in heaven and dirty sinners rot forever in hell. A soft, warm smile spread across Mago's face. He gently patted their heads, declaring that with their unbreakable will, but peace is always fleeting. One fateful day Lepus crashed in, carrying a grim message that shattered their... The arrogant hero association was practically begging for his help, a plea Mago was fully prepared to ignore, considering they had completely dismissed him in the past. But then Lepus dropped a terrifying bombshell. Eswed had just surfaced in Finland. Shock rattled Mago's core and he instantly demanded the assembly of every equality member. Tragically, their allies had completely vanished off the grid. Left with absolutely zero options, Mago rushed to see Miel and Mael one final time. The moment he broke the news of his departure, Mael took it the absolute worst. Tears welling in her eyes, she frantically pleaded to know when their master would return. With a heavy heartbroken gaze, Mago gently told them it would take a few long years. Knowing the enemy ahead was an absolute monster, Mael begged to tag along, but Mago shot the idea down instantly. This foe was way too ruthless to even risk bringing kids into the crossfire. Tears streamed down Mael's face, completely devastated at the thought of watching him walk away into pure danger, and the agonizing fear of being abandoned all over again tore her apart. Lepus quickly stepped in, gently reminding the twins that they weren't just some disposable tools to be tossed aside. To soothe their shattered hearts, Mago offered them one final, deeply personal gift. He conjured the very garments draped over their shoulders today, promising that as long as they wore them, he softly urged them to seek refuge at a local shelter and trust others for protection, swearing on his life that their paths would cross again. You could definitely point the finger at Mago for the nightmare that unfolded next, because Miel and Mael never even set foot inside that safe house. Absolutely terrified of the outside world, the siblings locked themselves away deep within a rugged mountain range, pouring all their energy into mastering their terrifying powers. Trapped in that suffocating isolation with no one but each other, they endlessly debated how to mold their talents so they could grow into genuinely good-hearted adults. While waiting for the day Mago would finally return, they obsessed over the razor-thin line separating right from wrong. But the heaviest question weighing on their young minds, exactly how they were meant to wield these godlike gifts they had been cursed with. Fast forward 2 whole years. The twins had finally carved out their own twisted definitions of virtue and sin, entirely cut off from the rest of. Armed with this unwavering mindset, they marched straight back into their childhood village. Their logic was brutally simple. The righteous would inherit a glittering paradise, while the wicked would rot in eternal agony. Right then and there, they engineered their very own divine judgment system, condemning everyday citizens over incredibly trivial mistakes. In their warped reality, these minor slip-ups made them prime targets for absolute execution. In barely 30 days, these 2 pint-sized dictators had They pulled this off by conjuring armies of angels and demons, ordering these entities to stalk and monitor every single villager relentlessly for an entire. The residents were ruthlessly sorted into 2 extreme factions, the blessed and the damned. And the craziest part, their ultimate standard for divine justice was just a list back when they were toddlers. Basic stuff like keeping your hands off, never tossing trash on the street, using inside voices, refusing to tell a single lie, and never, ever fighting. They were just kids, gripping onto a naive black and white morality that was way too simplistic for the complexities of the real world. That was exactly what made them so utterly terrifying, because in their innocent little minds, they were the absolute heroes of this story, effortlessly dealing out salvation or eternal torment completely on a whim. The lucky few deemed worthy of paradise were forced into an endless euphoric slumber, trapped inside a beautifully fabricated lie. It wasn't long before the horrific rumors of this village leaked all the way to the top brass at the Hero Association. Utarity, the reigning chairman of the organization, spearheaded a hyper-focused emergency briefing. Only 4 key figures bothered to show up to this critical summit, himself included. Tisu Banjo, a solid rank 3 champion, shrugged it off, assuming the rest of the crew was probably kicking back on vacation. Meanwhile, Husto, a fellow 3rd-tier fighter, was itching to wrap things up quickly, desperately hunting for a mission with a bit more blood-pumping action. After skimming through the files for a hot minute, Husta groaned, realizing the board was completely swamped. with absolutely no one in the big leagues would even bat an eye at garbage like this. Banjo let out a frustrated sigh too. She was dying to rank up, but to pull that off, she needed to crush at least Class B2 threats. Utariti casually mentioned he had a nasty Class B3 mission lined up if she was feeling brave, but she instantly brushed it off, claiming that sweating through a nightmare mission just wasn't worth the hassle. Why a massive, full-blown village siege was popping up on their radar in the first place. Utariti revealing that these pint-sized dictators were officially flagged as Class B1 criminal threats, which gave him every right to toss their file onto the table. Husta raised an eyebrow, questioning their exact age, to which the chairman flatly maybe even younger. Husta's jaw practically hit the floor. Wait, they haven't even hit puberty, and they already conquered an entire city block? Banjo nervously calculated the odds. If these brats were already dealing this kind of damage, they were practically destined to mutate into Class B2 or even B3 monsters. Husta threw out the idea of bringing them in and rehabilitating them under their own roof, but Utariti immediately shut it down, citing a massive lack of funding and the exhausting years it would take. On top of that, these kids were already locked in as Mago's personal disciples well back in the day anyway. Banjo snapped back, arguing that if Mago was the one who practically raised them, cleaning up this mess should strictly be his headache. However, Husta quickly popped her bubble, dropping the bomb that Mago was currently half. Right on cue, the quiet third member suddenly lit up with a spark in her eyes, eagerly begging to take the job. This was Chitu, an elite rank 3 operative and an incredibly gifted summoner. The second her boots hit the dirt on the outskirts of the village, her breath hitched at the surreal, mind-bending spectacle ahead. Hundreds of unconscious bodies suspended mid-air. Mael and Miel locked their deadly gazes onto her in an instant, but Chitu couldn't care less. She whipped out her camera, casually snapping selfies with the bewildered ghost soldier, totally geeking out over the mechanics of this crazy power, since her targets barely even looked dead. Out of nowhere, the sinister twins materialized right in front of her, demanding to know what she was doing in their territory. A huge grin spread across Chitu's face, absolutely thrilled to realize she was dealing with highly classified. Always hungry to witness rare magic firsthand, she excitedly asked if they had any more wild tricks hidden up their sleeves. Miel, getting visibly annoyed, demanded a straight answer, but Chitu completely ignored his hostility. Instead, she tilted her head deeply, curious if Mago actually realized these kids were carrying a freakish top. That legendary master made it a strict rule to only ever accept pure. It dawned on her right then, Mago had kept them completely in the dark. Confused, Miel demanded to know who this stranger was. Ripping off her mask, she introduced herself as their senior apprentice, Chitu. When Miel mentioned that their master had never breathed a word about her, she just smirked. She knew it. To put it mildly, she and Mago constantly butted heads. Her true obsession. Anything. Their master had relentlessly hounded her, demanding she balance her lethal strikes with solid defensive magic. But playing it safe just wasn't in her blood, so she flat out ignored his orders. Because of her stubbornness, Mago slowly but surely began acting like she didn't even exist. The sheer cruelty of it broke her. Tears streamed down her face as she shrieked hysterically about his heartless betrayal, again and again, sending a deep chill down Mael's spine. Mago used to praise her raw talent with such a warm smile, yet he completely erased her from his memory. Channeling his magic, Miel ordered the lunatic to back off. Instead, Chitu conjured a massive storm of gleaming swords and violently unleashed them, mercilessly skewering innocent bystanders and anyone else unlucky enough to be in her path. A twisted thought fueled her rampage. Maybe a bloodbath would finally force Mago to remember her. Honestly, their master is starting to feel like the real monster of this story. Good grief, Chitu cackled like an absolute maniac, butchering the helpless crowd while riding a sick, unprecedented high of pure ecstasy. Panic set in as the siblings checked on one another, desperately trying to formulate a plan. Meanwhile, the deranged senior literally skipped through the carnage. Sprawling out right in the middle of the slaughter, she gleefully admitted that this massacre was way more thrilling than she ever dreamed. But her bloodlust was far from satisfied. She casually flicked a dagger toward a trembling survivor, only for the siblings to dive in and block the fatal strike. This actually delighted Chitu. She loved seeing their flawless defensive magic in action. Suddenly, a city guard lunged at her blind spot, but she dodged with terrifying speed, taunting the siblings that their offensive skills were painfully lacking. Miel practically spat out that she was destined to burn in hell. Chitu feigned a heartbreaking pout, whining that a senior apprentice deserves at least a little respect. Truth be told, she had spent her whole life fantasizing about unleashing her powers on a massive crowd. Under normal circumstances, pulling a stunt like this would earn a supposed hero an instant one-way ticket to a maximum security cell. But thanks to the siblings, she finally had the perfect excuse to let loose and fulfill her darkest desires. Pushed to the brink, an incredible surge of confidence washed over her. She could finally manifest her ultimate weapon. Howling at the top of her lungs, she poured every ounce of her twisted energy into a single spell and dragged the colossal, terrifying razor blade right out of thin air, blood aggressively dripping from her own face. You see, the mind's eye is the absolute core foundation of any summoner's magic. Since bathing in the blood of countless victims had pushed her into a state of total euphoria, her twisted imagination erupted, supercharging her lethal abilities beyond anything she had ever felt. Awestruck by her own monstrous potential, she marveled at the towering weapon hovering above her and offered the siblings a genuinely psychotic thank you. Gratitude aside, it was finally time to butcher them. But out of nowhere, a massive, nightmarish beast materialized and swallowed her. It turned out she wasn't the only one vibrating with overwhelming, mind-bending emotion. Mael's sheer terror had painted Chitu as a literal demon in her mind, and that horrific visualization dramatically amplified. Trembling, she looked at her brother, desperately asking if she had just murdered a human being. Without hesitation, Miel wrapped his arms around her tightly and fiercely swore that the thing she slaughtered was an absolute monster, nothing close to human. Fast forward 1 year, and the deadly duo had violently expanded their terror, crushing anyone in their path. Their ruthless reign officially crowned them as Class B2 villains within the infamous Ruculus prison system. Staring at their mugshots in the criminal database, Mago's heart dropped into his stomach. Since Utority was well aware of his past connection to these rogue apprentices, the commander brought the files straight to his desk. Mago instantly sprang up to hunt them down, but Utority slammed the brakes coldly, stating that a different operative would take the case. When Mago furiously demanded an explanation, Utority's answer was brutally sharp. He reminded Mago of a past promise he had literally begged for a swift execution once captured. Yet Mago had gone soft, handing him right over to the government suits instead. Because of that pathetic mercy, Utority saw zero reason to grant him any more favors. But Mago completely ignored the refusal, growling that he was taking this mission, whether the boss liked it or not. Slamming his fist onto the desk, Utority roared his absolute command. Mago was grounded. Period. Unfazed, Maga snapped right back, ripping into the man's pathetic obsession with power and control. Right as the tension peaked, a bold voice interrupted, volunteering for the blood. That someone being Rausa. Utority gave a smug nod. Bagging the runaway siblings would be the ultimate ticket for her next big promotion. Mago stubbornly stood his ground, but Rausa walked right up to his grim face, softly begging the broken mentor to just trust her this one time. Deep inside their eerily silent city, the sibling villains instantly sensed fresh meat crossing their borders. A sinister smirk crept up, exactly how much filthy sin weighed on this trespasser's soul. Marching confidently down the abandoned streets, Rausa stumbled upon the broken bodies of the previous hero squad, who dared to challenge the twins. Miraculously, they were still breathing. In a blinding flash, the siblings swapped places with the fallen heroes, and Miel coldly interrogated the outsider on why she was crashing their graveyard. Rausa didn't waste a single second laying out exactly why she had tracked them down. Standing tall as a hero, she made it crystal clear that her only goal was to bring them home safely. That instantly struck a nerve. Miel aggressively conjured a terrifying horde of demons, warning the hero to back off before she dragged her straight down to hell. Surprisingly, Rausa agreed to walk away, but she dropped one massive condition: the siblings had to pack up and leave right alongside her. Panic set in, and the desperate kids threw everything they had at the intruder. But all their frantic attacks barely left a scratch against. Rausa's heart ached as she casually deflected their blows, gently pointing out that they were just sweet kids deep down. She couldn't sense a single drop of killer instinct in their strikes, making it hit her right then. If the previous heroes had just shown an ounce of genuine compassion, this massive disaster would never have spiraled so wildly out of control. The twisted irony was that these poor kids genuinely believed they were fighting for justice, utterly confused as to why society kept trying to tear them down. Trembling in pure terror, the pair braced themselves as she stepped closer. But instead of striking, Rausa swore she wouldn't lay a finger on them, while softly explaining that their dark crusade she revealed that their beloved mentor was drowning in sorrow over their actions. Miel aggressively brushed it off at first, shouting that if Mago actually cared, he would have rescued. Looking them dead in the eye, Ryosa swore she was telling the absolute truth. She pleaded with the young duo to power down their magic and just come home. She promised to guide them straight back to their teacher's waiting arms. In that fragile second, an overwhelming motherly warmth washed over both Miel and Mael. Dropping their guard, they finally surrendered. The moment they reunited with Mago, the floodgates opened, and Miel spilled his guts about everything. He confessed that they actually possessed a dangerously rare power, completely hiding their. The terrified kids fully believed they would be rejected, knowing damn well that the old master strictly accepted only pure summoners under his wing. Tears streaming down their faces, they desperately begged for forgiveness. Utterly stunned, Mago demanded to know who fed them such a massive lie, to which they pointed the finger directly at Chitu. They claimed the female hero used to be his star pupil. Frowning in confusion, Mago firmly shut that down, clarifying that he had never won. Their paths had crossed exactly one time, where he casually tossed her a single piece of advice. Reunited after 3 agonizing years, the trio spent hours catching up on the absolute hell they had been through. The weary siblings poured their hearts out, explaining how hard they clawed to become decent humans, only to be constantly vilified by a world that refused to understand them. Even now, Miel and Mael were completely clueless as to why humanity treated them like total garbage. Stepping into the emotional reunion, Ryosa quietly asked if Mago. Without missing a beat, the desperate teacher dropped to his knees, begging the hero to leave the kids in his custody. He knew damn well that even without direct blood on their hands, taking thousands of innocent lives hostage and being tied to a hero's murder meant dodging a brutal execution was basically impossible. But they were just broken, lonely children pushed down a pitch-black path. Swallowing his pride, he offered to shoulder the ultimate punishment for every single one of their sins. Normally, bending the rules was entirely off the table for Ryosa, even if she utterly despised the ruthless Utari law that demanded the death penalty for juvenile offenders. The law was absolute, and a hero's job was extermination, not therapy. Yet looking at these 2 shivering runaways, she felt the exact same crushing pity that Mago did. Sick and tired of this twisted system, she made a bold move, asking the old master to join forces with her. Right there, she made a blood oath to completely rewrite the rules of their rotten world, no matter the deadly. Absolutely captivated by the blazing fire in Ryosa's eyes, Mago agreed, but laid down one hardcore ultimatum. Nobody gets to touch these kids until they come of age. To guarantee their survival, he prepared to sacrifice his magic for one final desperate move. Ryosa gave the green light. Mago unleashed his ultimate barrier, wrapping the siblings in an unbreakable shield of pure love. That absolute defense was exactly why they had casually shrugged off Gang Yu's lead. Snapping back to the present, Gang Yu's mind flashed to his very first encounter with Ryosa, echoing those exact same merciful words. Shaking off the dust, he heard Miel screaming that society was just blindly executing its own flawed agenda. Weren't laws just hypocritical rules written by arrogant humans? If everyone was just forcing their beliefs on others, what the hell made the heroes any better? Desperate Hong frantically pleaded with Gang Yu to give rehabilitation a chance, but he coldly silenced her by trapping her inside an energy bubble. His eyes hollow, the juggernaut took a slow, heavy step forward. An immense, utterly terrified, Miel sobbed out a frantic apology, begging for mercy and promising they would never step out of line again. But when the monstrous fighter didn't even blink, the horrified kids realized death was inches away. They could only scream out for their dead mother and their beloved mentor, the only man who had ever truly fought for them. The entire prison violently quaked as the devastating strike detonated. But the crater was blasted deep into the concrete floor, missing them. Paralyzed by his own conflicting morals, 1,000 different thoughts violently crashed through Gang Yu's mind. But his internal crisis was abruptly cut short when a dimensional rift ripped open, and Sinka casually strolled out from behind, instantly slicing the weeping siblings into tiny, gruesome pieces. Stepping over the gore, she playfully teased the horrified brawler, telling him to wipe that pathetic, gloomy look. She giggled, pointing out that acting like a brooding philosopher totally ruined his vibe. Plus, soaking in his rugged features up close, she admitted, smirking, she openly bragged about hitting the jackpot by claiming him as her future husband. But before the twisted psycho could spit out another word, Gang Yu snapped, launching a lethal, full-power haymaker straight at her face, only to have it effortless. The feral bodyguard growled in pure disgust. furious that this outsider wasn't kneeling quietly, like an obedient dog. Annoyed by the interrupt, reminding him that the angry brawler was destined to become his new king. Bowing his head, Canis quickly swallowed his pride, clearing the stage for Sinka to formally introduce her twisted self once more. But Gong Yu doesn't hesitate. He launches another fierce strike, forcing her to throw up a defensive shield. Clearly, patience isn't his strong suit. Still, since they're going to be spending some quality time together, she figures they might as well get acquainted. Just like he heard, she introduces herself as Sinka, and her grand destiny to become the new Eve of a reborn human race. Gang Yu stares at her, completely baffled by her nonsense. Honestly, he is just exhausted by all this drama. An absolute lunatic just dropped right in front of him, and he's standing there trying to process the sheer madness. Sinka coolly claims she is probably the most rational person on the entire planet, a statement her followers eagerly back up. She declares that humanity is dangling over the edge, slowly rotting away with every passing second. If things stay on this path, they are speeding toward total extinction. Gong Yu squints, demanding to know what the hell she means. Instead of answering, she fires back with a riddle. What does he think poses the ultimate danger to the world today? Since he used to run with equality, he probably assumes the answer is the supervillains, or maybe those old-school heroes who abused their absolute power. Wrong on both counts. The real cancer chewing away at humanity's core. The ordinary, powerless people living their mundane little lives. Their inferior DNA needs to be erased. Only those, but because the gifted elites sacrifice themselves, breeding like sewer rats. Take the second-generation equality heroes led by Ryosa, for instance. They wielded godlike power, so why were they wiped out? It completely defies the laws of natural selection. Mother Nature dictates that the weak perish, but those fools actually tried to stand in evolution's way. In case he's worried, she assures him he is totally safe from this purge, since he hung up his hero cape a long time ago. Right now, he must be getting a thrill out of slaughtering the weak right. Watching him in action made her instantly fall head over heels. She wants him to realize that this prison isn't a cage. It's a sanctuary for the elite mutants destined to inherit the Earth, who were unjustly locked up just for weeding out the trash. And wipe every last inferior human off the map. They will forge a brutal paradise, where only the strong survive. An alpha utopia. And she is feeling generous if any of those heroes decide to flip sides and join the winning team. She'll actually spare their lives. They aren't totally merciless. Gong Yu mutters that he usually avoids killing every thug he meets, but looking at her, a bloodbath feels pretty much unavoidable. Sinka blushes, teasing him for saying something so terribly embarrassing. Her goons quickly point out that he definitely isn't flirting with her, and Sinka finally gets the hint. But she insists they can get rough later, when they are completely alone. Clearing her throat, she gets back to her villainous monologue. He is the chosen Adam, and she is his Eve. Together, they are going to spawn an army of super children to spearhead the next stage of human evolution. Originally, she targeted Juan to see if he was prime Adam material, even triggering a massive EMP strike just to bust him out. But this fortress was built like a tank. The outer defenses were so ridiculously tight that her outside assaults did absolutely zero damage. That is exactly why once they managed to snatch the facility's secret blueprints, they rigged a custom EMP bomb and detonated it right from the inside, using her powers. But she quickly realized the kid is way too young and hasn't even hit puberty yet. And since a superhuman's true power only fully awakens in adulthood, he still needs a lot more time in the oven. But the clock is ticking, and she refuses to let her grand master plan stall out here. She had orchestrated an absolute master plan. Until Juan reaches adulthood, she'd be working right alongside him, and once he comes of age, they'd all join forces for the sake of humanity. She'd actually cooked up a brilliant method to pass down the top-tier genetics belonging to both of them, and the kicker is this new family wouldn't share a single drop of actual biology. She leans in, asking Gong Yu if he's following along, but his mind is completely locked onto one detail. They deployed an EMP strike, the exact same wave that wiped out. Sinka tilts her head, wondering why he cares so much, until it clicks. His brother was a prison inspector at that facility, so he perished in the blast along with everyone else. But she casually brushes it off, since he can just build a brand new family, right here with her. She smirks, asking if he's made his choice. Gong Yu's mind was made up ages ago. He completely retracts his earlier statement about taking lives being unavoidable. He swears to make her downfall pure agony, promising to dismantle her piece by piece and crush her into absolute dust. Sinka gasps, pretending to be shocked that he'd want to tear her down. But honestly, a little lover's spat doesn't sound too bad. That's how bonds grow stronger, right? She marvels at his raw energy, barely throwing up a guard in time to deflect his sudden vicious strike. The impact forces Gong Yu to slide back. She seizes the moment to snap the portal shut, playfully suggesting they take this brawl outside, just until he cools that pretty little head of his. But Gong Yu isn't letting her off the hook. He channels every ounce of his power and lunges right into her face, launching a relentless barrage of heavy blows. Sinka treats the whole assault like a fun game, taunting him, daring the boy to just catch her already. But Gong Yu has absolutely zero patience for her games, and he's more than happy to grant her wish by smashing her into the ground. He triggers Mode 1, boosting his speed to a terrifying level, nearly getting his hands on Sinka, but she slips away at the last second, telling him to wait. Gang Yu, however, is way past listening and charges in, launching wave after wave of attacks, until who locks him down tight. Sinka sighs, thinking everything was going so perfectly. She didn't even need the help, but Gato bluntly states that she was about to get herself eliminated. Before Sinka can even fire back a response, Gong Yu snatches Gato and slams her into the concrete with absolute maximum force, leaving nothing behind but a messy crimson splatter. Shockingly, Gato materializes right behind Sinka, repeating that one hit from that kid would have ended her. So how is she going to repay the life she just sacrificed for her? Sinka finally caves with a heavy sigh, admitting it's a total shame to lose such premium genetics and accept the world exactly as it is. In response, Gong Yu shifts straight into Mode 5, but Sinka is done playing nice. She rips open multiple dimensions, spilling her entire crew onto the battlefield. She tells him to say hello to the guests, because they are the new era of humanity, and they'll be running the show from today onward. Emerging from Block B3 is Swede, a summoner class who's still fuming that Mago didn't meet her end by his hands. Then there's Ho, a physical brawler, wondering if he can finally tame her. Friachua, another physical powerhouse, casually asks if they even need him for this. Natura, a special class, reminds him that everyone has a role in this new utopia. Pekenyu, a special class, is shivering, completely consumed by her own fear. Vidi, another special class, looks at the chaos and feels absolutely inspired. Morris, a special class, scolds him for lighting up a smoke in a public space. Xingxi, a physical class, just blankly mutters her own name. And Tiburon, a physical class, barks at everyone to shut their mouths. Hyunju Young, a special class, smirks, noting how perfectly fitting it is to see a bunch of demons gathered in hell. Moving to the Block B4 inmates, Tatsujin, a special/physical class, realizes her blade's sheath is completely empty. Stiffness, a physical bruiser, scoffs that only total losers need to rely on weapons in a real fight. Terrapir, a physical class, is blown away that number 4 is actually still breathing. Melody, a summoner/special class, happily points out how cozy her outfit feels today. Hero, a special class, just stands there in dead silence. And finally, the absolute worst of the bunch, the Block B5 inmates, Aora, a special class, and Huang, another special class, who smiles thrilled to finally cross paths with Gong Yu. But the boy is entirely swallowed by absolute fury and a burning thirst for payback, so he triggers his ultimate trump card, Mode 0. Without a second thought, he blasts forward, aiming to wipe out Huang before anyone can blink. The moment Gong Yu closes the gap, they both detonate a massive shockwave of energy, shaking the entire prison facility to its very core from the sheer impact. Morris just shakes his head, muttering that this is an incredibly savage way to throw, while Ho desperately prays no one perishes in the incoming blast. The terrified guards up above scream at the warden to evacuate, but she's absolutely frozen, totally paralyzed by the sheer scale of the carnage. Not even the most brilliant tactical mind could have predicted this absolute nightmare. Gang Yu barely flinches from the strike, instantly igniting his devastating Zero Mode once more. Every single villain, locked away in Sector B3 and B4, was originally taken down by the Equality heroes, yet not a single one of them has ever witnessed Gong Yu unleash this kind of apocalyptic battle aura. Hero finally grasps exactly why Ryosa desperately benched him, keeping him out of the fray, even when all hope seemed completely lost. To Terrapir, he isn't just a fighter. He is the Grim Reaper incarnate, a walking monument of absolute terrifying supremacy. And the onlookers caught in his shadow all react in wildly different ways. Some stare in pure reverence, itching to either sketch his magnificent form or clash fists with him. Others practically choke on their own bitter envy, fully aware they are hopelessly outmatched. One observer's heart aches with deep sorrow over his ruthless choices, while a certain lunatic grins ear to ear, vibrating with pure, unadulterated joy at the sight of this beast. Huang is genuinely caught off guard. After crossing fists so many times, he never imagined the kid had hidden tricks left. Has he seriously been masking this bottomless well of power? The kid is an absolute freak of nature. Gang Yu explodes forward with zero mercy, aiming to kill, but Huang masterfully deflects the brutal strike. The tyrant senses his opponent is holding back even more, and he wants a front row seat to the whole show. Without warning, he retaliates, unleashing a blazing flurry of a dozen. Yet Gang Yu bounces back up in a heartbeat, rocketing forward like a homing missile, only to slam into an invisible brick wall mere inches from Huang's face. Too bad for him, Huang had already warped and compressed the very fabric of space right in front of his body, forcing Gang Yu to violently smash into the unseen barrier. Maledicti observes the bloodbath, remarking that the brat is absolutely terrifying. Pushing out that much raw devastation with just a single ability is completely... Plus, since hitting adulthood naturally skyrockets and awakens potential. Just what kind of apocalyptic monster is this teenager destined to become? Huang loudly taunts Gang Yu, perfectly aware that a pathetic little bump like that wouldn't keep the boy grounded. Just as the words leave his grinning mouth, Gang Yu materializes and buries a bone-crushing haymaker into his face, violently pivoting his hips to deliver a lethal gut punch that launches Huang hurtling straight through solid concrete. Shin watches the titanic clash unfold completely breath. Tiburon mutters under his breath, realizing they are witnessing a deadly dance between two absolute... But the second those words slip past his lips, both of their heads are cleanly sliced right off their shoulders. Without skipping a beat, Gang Yu pivots his wrath, who barely manages to block the onslaught by desperately throwing up Mago's. It's a genuine masterpiece of defensive sorcery. A brilliant creation left behind by a mage who perished way too soon. Is Aswad starting to feel the heavy sting of nostalgia as he channels his fallen comrade's dying magic? Triggered by his taunts, Gang Yu cranks up his ferocious pressure, viciously splintering the magic shield, as Aswad bitterly confesses his deep jealousy of the boy's monstrous physical might, right before Gang Yu completely obliterates him from existence. Hero leaps into the meat grinder, landing a desperate flying kick to shove Gang Yu back. But sadly for this crew, this is barely the warm-up of the boy's blood-soaked rampage. He is hell-bent on dragging every last one of them down to face brutal, uncompromising justice. Brushing off the debris, Huang whines at him to pause, complaining that this was supposed... On top of that, his instincts are screaming that the kid is still keeping an ace up his sleeve. But what on earth is he Is he actually pulling his punches to protect those useless prison guards upstairs? Still a bleeding heart to the very bitter end, huh? Playing house like this is way too dull for the tyrant, so he decides to carve out a custom slaughterhouse just for the two of them. With a single godlike flex of his bicep, the massive penitentiary violently groans, twisting and buckling under invisible gravity, brutally tearing the entire complex cleanly in half and exposing the cold night sky above. From this exact moment forward, it is time to take off the kid gloves and unleash absolute hell on Earth. But mere milliseconds before the massive fortress collapses into rubble, instantly expends a massive chunk of his aura, violently launching the warden and her guards far away inside protective energy spheres, shielding them completely from the catastrophic guaranteed slaughter waiting for them in the plunging debris. Cracking his neck, Huang casually notes the durability of the concrete, giving Gang Yu the perfect opening to blitz right up to his face, until Sinka suddenly warps Huang out of the blast zone. She coldly scolds the boy, stating it's totally classless to interrupt someone mid-flex. Sighing heavily, she decides it's time for her squad to bail out. The thick, choking debris is really starting to mess with her sinuses. Meanwhile, Tatsuo carelessly snatches a jagged chunk of rubble, cleanly forging it into and immediately starts slicing open the outer shell of the doomed prison. Sinka raises an eyebrow, genuinely impressed by the girl's lethal precision, but sharply tells her to knock it off, ordering her to conserve her stamina and just step through the dimensional gateway instead. Gang Yu suddenly materializes smack in the middle of the bustling metropolis, But before he can even blink, Sinka drops another portal beneath him, swallowing him whole, leaving the terrified civilians totally bewildered by the glitch in reality. He is violently spat right back out at Ground Zero. The once great prison is now nothing but a colossal floating sphere of twisted steel puppeted by Huang, who ruthlessly detonates the entire metal moon right into Gong Yu's face. As the apocalypse, Huang casually swaggers down into the smoking crater looming over a battered and bleeding Gang Yu. The villainous peanut gallery watches from the sky above, while Sinka barks a strict order for everyone to stay out of the crossfire. They are on spectator duty, nothing more. And the only reason these bloodthirsty psychos from Sector B3 and B4 are obeying her like well-trained boils down to one highly effective tactic. Every single time she recruited a supervillain, she made them one deeply intoxicating promise. Dangling their deepest cravings like a carrot on a stick, she masterfully played on human greed to rope everyone into her alpha world. A few rebels dared to push back, but Sinka laid down the law. Sure, they could say no, but rejection meant a one-way ticket to the afterlife. When she pitched her wild idea to Huang, he busted a gut laughing. The thought of her tying the knot with Gang Yu first and then him, pure comedy gold. Still, he spotted a glaring flaw in her grand scheme. Crushing Gang Yu in battle sounded way more thrilling than playing house. Sinka feigned concern, warning him that chasing cheap thrills would just turn him into a dopamine junkie. He needed to play the long game. If he actually managed to take down Gang Yu, what the heck would he do next? Huang shrugged it off. He fully expected to bite the dust by the end of their clash, but who cares? Going out in a blaze of glory sounded like a blast. Left utterly speechless, Sinka threw a massive curveball. What if she had a kid with Gang Yu and then popped out one of his? Once those brats grew up, they'd be the ultimate entertainment. A fully grown offspring would pack a serious punch, making his future battles against Gang Yu infinitely more satisfying. If he teamed up with her, he'd guarantee a lifetime of endless action. Spotting that twisted gleam in her eyes, Huang took the bait. It sounded like an absolute riot, even if he didn't give a damn about her romantically. How the heck were they supposed to get hitched? Sinka waved off his doubts. By the time they walked down the aisle, he'd be head over heels, and she could swear on it. Yeah, the chick is completely unhinged, but honestly, I'd probably fall for her too. Out of nowhere, Gang Yu buries his fist deep into Huang's gut, giving Huang a brutal reality check. Fighting with just one hand wasn't gonna cut it. Plus, his opponent hadn't said a word. Was Gang Yu just gonna stay mute for the whole brawl? Desperate to force a reaction, Huang brutally drops a bomb, that bizarre, balled-up mass he's been clutching this whole time. That's Gang Yu's precious little brother, mangled into a grotesque sphere. Pure, unadulterated fury consumes Gang Yu. He unleashes a spine-chilling roar and launches himself at Huang like a rabid beast. As the berserker closes the distance, Huang flexes his powers, erupting a barrage of jagged stone spikes from the earth. But the deadly obstacles don't even slow Gang Yu down. He's locked in, weaving through the chaos with terrifying precision. Suddenly, the mangled remains of his brother are thrust right into his path. Gang Yu freezes, unable to bring himself to strike down his own flesh and blood, and that hesitation sends him slamming face first into the dirt. Huang played him like a fiddle. He knew Gang Yu wouldn't dare attack it. Then Huang gets a truly sickening idea. What if he just swallowed the kid whole? Would that make him untouchable? The lump is too chunky, so he compresses it down, but Gang Yu refuses to let this twisted kid make another move. He delivers a brutal kick to Huang's stomach, followed by a relentless storm of heavy blows, pounding him deeper and deeper into the crater. Gasping for breath, Huang finally scrapes together enough raw power to snatch Gang Yu, triggering his ability to bathe the entire battlefield. Sinka watches, completely spellbound by his sheer power. It's such a tragedy these two couldn't just kiss and make up. The onlookers agree, but right now, this brutal showdown is reaching its explosive climax. Both fighters are bruised and battered, yet Gang Yu forces himself back onto his feet, unleashing his domain to anchor the zone and throw up a massive smokescreen. Huang just cackles like a maniac. Seriously, how many broken abilities is this guy hoarding? The dude is practically invincible. Smirking, he asks Gang Yu how it felt to cross the line and take a life. He bets Gang Yu feels just as hollow as he does. After all, they're surrounded by fragile insects that break way too easily. Gang Yu barks at him to shut his mouth, but Huang presses on. Didn't it feel euphoric to finally let the monster off the leash? It must have been absolute torture, suffocating that raw power day in and day out. All just to play nice with the weak. Gong Yu's gaze turns deadly cold. He tells the brat that he doesn't know a single thing about the real world. He's just a clueless punk. Huang glances up, his eyes widening at the cataclysmic attack Gong Yu has been brewing. This is the curtain call. Staring his fate in the face, a fleeting thought hits him. If he had actually lived long enough to grow up, could he have taken this guy down? Gang Yu shatters that delusion. He tells him to stop dreaming this is the end of the line for him. The devastating energy descends, warping the very air around the battlefield, making Sinka panic enough to desperately rip open a portal. But she's too late. Huang is already wiped out. Frantic Sinka dives into the chaos and warps his mangled body straight to Terrapir, screaming at him to work a miracle right now. Terrapir doesn't waste a single second, realizing the kid shouldn't have survived. But somehow Huang instinctively shielded his vital organs at the last millisecond, which is absolutely mind-blowing. Terrapir begins extracting the residual traces of Gong Yu's powers from his body, studying the lethal before effortlessly severing Huang's ruined arm and forging a pristine replacement. The question remains, what's the play with Gong Yu now? Hero scoffs, thinking it's a no-brainer. Just finish the guy off. But Sinka throws up a hand, demanding they hold off on the final blow. She wants one final face-to-face with him. Back at Ground Zero, Gang Yu slumps in the devastated crater. Hours bleed by, and as consciousness slowly creeps back, his first instinct is to gently cradle the grotesque remains of his little brother. The crushing sorrow is almost suffocating. That's when Sinka steps out of the shadows and drops her final pitch. The offer is still on the table. All he has to do is take her hand, and together they can forge a brand new world. Gong Yu remains dead silent, igniting his power. This instantly shatters Sinka's final shred of hope for him, as cold sweat freezes the boy dead in his tracks. With negotiations officially dead in the water, it is time to strike before he regains his stamina. He glances around, demanding to know if anyone dares to object. The consensus is absolute: Gong Yu has to die. A few actually feel sorry for the kid, seeing him as nothing more than foolish and tragically young. But the rest, they are just itching to wrap this up after wasting the entire day standing around. Hero suddenly barks at the crowd to clear the zone. His muscles expand violently, morphing him into a colossal titan. He unleashes a devastating full-force hook directly at Gang Yu, yet the boy barely flinches, using his own flesh to shield his brother's battered body. That single strike opens the floodgates, triggering They barrage him relentlessly, wave after wave. Hours bleed away, but Gong Yu stands his ground, stubbornly defending his brother's mangled remains. Just as Hero winds up to crush the boy into dust, Huang suddenly intercepts the strike. His mind flashes back to Sinka's eerie prediction that this kid's true, terrifying power would only awaken once he hit adulthood. Witnessing this sheer resilience sparks a wildfire inside Huang, his very first true ambition. He craves the thrill of breaking Gang Yu himself. Stepping in, Sinka begrudgingly commands the bloodthirsty mob to stand down, threatening to slaughter anyone who dares to disobey. The surrounding villains immediately erupt in furious protests, but Sinka quickly shuts them down. She coldly reminds them of their sacred oath of absolute obedience. That silences the crowd instantly. As the rogue faction files into a glowing portal, Huang shoots one final burning glare at Gang Yu. He silently vows that next time they clash, he will be the one walking away. Meanwhile, the devastating EMP strike on the ultra-secure Ruculus Penitentiary has unleashed absolute chaos. 8 Class B3, 5 B4 level threats, and 3 terrifying B5 monsters have vanished without a trace into the shadows. The sole villain left sitting in the rubble is Kingston. He calmly watches the smoke clear, chuckling darkly to himself, as he predicts that the world is about to get a hell of a lot noisier. Kingston's twisted prophecy hits the bullseye. Sinka is gearing up to flip the entire globe upside down. A few days later, right in the middle of a mundane daytime broadcast, when the public suspects absolutely nothing, every single frequency is brutally hijacked. A chilling message flashes across the screens, welcoming humanity to the Alpha world. Sinka steps into the frame, rebranding herself as the Almighty Eve. Flanking her are 2 menacing figures she dubs her loyal attack dogs, Canis and Gado. So what exactly is this utopia they call the Alpha World? Canis leans into the mic smoothly, explaining that it is a paradise forged to cure a deeply diseased humanity. With Cinca reigning as the mother of a superior race, the real question drops. Who actually earns the golden ticket to survive in this utopia? Gato steps forward, laying out their twisted demands. Rule number 1, you must possess overwhelming superhuman abilities. Rule number 2, absolutely zero mercy. You are forbidden from shielding the useless rat and who failed to make the cut. Rule number 3, candidates must be in prime health and entirely capable of reproducing. And as for the billions who fail to meet these godlike standards, Cinca stares dead into the camera, declaring that simply existing with unchosen genes is a direct crime against the future of humanity. Therefore, the only logical verdict is absolute extermination. They will be slaughtered without a second thought, purging the earth, until only the elite remain. Over the next few months, her syndicate will handpick the chosen ones, delivering exclusive, bloody invitations to join their new world order. Anyone foolish enough to rip up their ticket will be instantly branded a traitor, and they will be mercilessly wiped out right alongside the genetic rejects. With that terrifying ultimatum, the feed cuts out, plunging televisions back to their regular brain-numbing daytime programming. Meanwhile, in a dimly lit, heavily fortified war room, the world's most powerful elites are furiously debating the ruckulous prison breakout and the nightmare broadcast that just terrorized the globe. President Bezet slams his hands on the table, demanding the World Security Council meeting commence immediately. Time is rapidly running out. The analysts scramble to pull up Cinca's dossier, only to find a glaring red flag: she isn't even registered on the Global Threat Index. This psycho literally manifested out of thin air. The council members groan, already realizing what a massive headache this girl is. Of course, a global crisis drops right into their laps the moment equality bites the dust. One official nervously stammers, begging for a strategy to neutralize her, but a sharp voice slices through the panic, insisting there is a much bigger mess to address first. Einheit, the iron-fisted leader of the Harmony Party, steps up. He aggressively questions why the chief warden, Suyun, took it upon herself to authorize the execution of high-value inmates, without breathing a single word to her superiors. How the hell does a single rogue officer casually hand out a license to kill whenever she feels like it? Another official quickly fires back, calling Einheit's accusation total garbage. Given the absolute bloodbath at the prison, Seoyun, honestly faced with that same nightmare, he would have pulled the trigger too. The man defending her is none other than Yorority, the legendary ex-chairman of the Hero Association and current head of the World Party. Einheit points out that despite the ticking clock, she had more than enough time to radio in a status. Utariti fires back, snapping that every single second mattered in that absolute bloodbath. She made a split-second call, and she nailed it flawlessly. Meanwhile, El Gallardo, the Minister of Justice, pushes back against Einheit's logic. He admits that handing out a license to kill on a whim is highly questionable, but recognizes the sheer chaos of that unprecedented crisis forced her hand. Taking the floor, bowed at the fire commissioner, warns that the public is living in sheer terror following the inmate's massive jailbreak. Chiming in, Crumb, the police commissioner, insists his squads have been grinding 24/7 to lock down the streets ever since that horrifying broadcast went live. Guevara, the vice minister of national defense, grimly declares that they are questioning if this is merely a one-off disaster. He had warned them before. Udariti completely loses his temper, roaring that he explicitly demanded those monsters be executed, yet this council dragged their feet for absolutely nothing. If he still sat in the chairman's seat at the Hero Association, those freaks would have been wiped off the map before a formal death sentence was even drafted. He is absolutely disgusted that they dared to cage the deadliest psychopaths on Earth inside a flimsy iron box. The moment Ryosa took charge, this entire system crashed and burned. Bauda dryly remarks that Utariti is just as stubborn as ever, while Einheit argues his past reign as chairman was deeply flawed. Back then, supposed saviors constantly abused their authority, acting like total lunatics. Udariti, scoffing, demands to know why that is even an issue. It is vastly superior to chain them to the title of hero, rather than watching them evolve into catastrophic threats. Once Ryosa grabbed the wheel, individuals brimming with heroic potential immediately relapsed into villainy, unleashing absolute hell on the streets. Bauda calmly reminds him that the era has shifted, but Utariti aggressively shuts him down. He brands them all as a pack of delusional old fools, so utterly blinded by their utopian fantasies that they cannot grasp the brutal reality staring them right in the face. Or worse, they are purposely turning a blind eye. Vizay gazes mournfully at the empty seat across the table, silently wondering how Ryosa would navigate this bitter feud. That heavy silence chokes the room, abruptly concluding the session. Sliding into his sleek car, Utaridi's aide cautiously asks how the talks played out. He mutters that, thankfully, not everyone is hell-bent on defending those scum's right to live when they should have been slaughtered ages ago. All this unchecked chaos traces right back to Ryosa, that naive little dreamer. The assistant questions what their next strategic move is, prompting Utaridi to break down the board. Following Ryosa's promotion, the core members of the WSC heavily pivoted toward rehabilitation. The only ones still thirsty for lethal punishment are the World Party and the police commissioner, while justice sits on the fence. It is a frustrating 4-2 split, rendering their hardline voices totally useless. Hell, even the current commander-in-chief is drifting toward Ryosa's soft-hearted camp. But with the chairman's throne currently collecting dust, they desperately need to plant a ruthless ally in that seat. Tying the vote at 3-all means they can finally dictate terms, which is exactly why they are currently speeding to recruit Gong Yu, the legendary former equality hero. Utaridi is positive their rivals are already scrambling to make a move. The aide hesitates, pointing out that Gong Yu was practically Ryosa's right-hand man, a fact Utaridi coldly confirms. However, with the geopolitical landscape entirely shattered, taking a gamble on him is their best play. Back in the day, whenever Gang Yu interrogated his squad about why permanently silencing villains was taboo, some cowards outright refused to entertain the morbid thought, while others anchored by family ties were terrified of the severe backlash and brutal penalties. One teammate even vomited up a mountain of philosophical garbage that absolutely no one gave a damn about, until Ryosa finally stepped in, lecturing him that playing executioner was not their duty. Their sole mission was to save lives, promising him that blind faith would fix everything. Yet those hypocritical bastards all wound up dead before ever giving him a straight, honest answer. Even in recent days, his brother's girlfriend fiercely opposed capital punishment, preaching that true heroes must rehabilitate broken inmates to reintegrate them into society. As Gong Yu strains to recall his exact response to her naive rant, a vivid hallucination of Huang and his brother looms over him. He is suffocating under the weight of sheer frustration, endlessly bombarded by pathetic, dodging excuses that refuse to quench his thirst for the dark truth. Gasping, he violently jerks awake, drenched in a freezing sweat, to find Mago's assistant anxiously standing vigil. She frantically asks if he is all right, bowing her head in deep regret for failing to provide backup, despite sensing the terrifying vibe at that hellish penitentiary. The corrupt warden had completely buried the massive riot, keeping her entirely in the dark. Gong Yu brushes off her apologies, muttering that it does not matter. Her presence would have been completely useless against that blood-soaked massacre anyway. Trembling slightly, the assistant presses him, pleading. Rumors had leaked that he was forced to play Grim Reaper inside those iron walls. Staring blankly, Gang Yu chillingly confesses that he is far from fine. He is a total wreck. Honestly, he deeply regrets not slaughtering every last one of those absolute bastards, wishing he had snapped their necks in, but his hands were tied. He glared at Lepus, asking if she just showed up to shove the same tired, no-killing morality down his throat like everybody else. If that was her game, she needed to walk right because the cape-wearing days were dead. He was a prison inspector now. Lepus practically begged, explaining they were rebuilding the Hero Association from the ground up, drafting fresh blood. She might be sitting in the chairman's seat today, but this new era demanded a true warrior at the helm, and all eyes were locked on him, the legendary former champion of equality. Gong Yu coldly reminded her he had already buried that life. Let the so-called heroes play dress-up and handle it. The second his bones healed, he was marching straight back into the fire to finish the... Suddenly, Utaridi crashed the tense standoff, smoothly agreeing with the battered fighter, confirming his new title as the ultimate prison enforcer. He tipped his hat to the brutal burden Gong Yu carried, slaughtering all those scumbags single-handed. But the lone wolf executions those days were officially over. Utaritai boldly declared he was taking the chairman throne, and his first order of business, legalizing the death penalty for villains. Gong Yu narrowed his eyes, recognizing the slick suit as the heavy hitter representing the World Party. But Utaridi waved it off. He was ditching his cozy political gig to forcefully grab the reins of the association. He only popped in to see if Gang Yu wanted a slice of the pie, but clearly the guy was a closed door. So consider this a friendly warning. He wished the inspector a speedy recovery, tossing a smug smirk at Lepus to keep her eyes glued to the upcoming election. She scoffed, demanding who in their right mind would vote for him. But Utority just chuckled. Just sit back and watch. Lepus spun around, desperate to reach Gong Yu, but he cut her off cold. He was completely drained and ordered her out. Sliding into the plush luxury of his town car, Utority mused that the chessboard was already shifting. Every single faction was gunning to control Gang Yu. Ever since superpowers exploded onto the scene, the world had been drowning in chaos. The military, the cops, they had all become pathetically dependent on one man. It wouldn't be long until the World Security Council put Gang Yu's lethal justice on trial. By the book. Sure, the inspector's violent crusade was totally illegal, no sugarcoating it. When his right-hand man asked for the master plan, Utority grinned. It was terrifyingly simple. He was going to rewrite the damn law at the next. Inside the council chamber, the atmosphere was boiling. Over the warden's brutal punishment, with Einheit screaming the loudest. Crumb coolly shrugged, admitting she would have brushed it under the rug if it were her own squad. Utority slammed his hand down, barking at Einheit to shut his mouth. The guy was just spitting useless noise without a single solid solution. Utority leaned forward, flashing a dangerous smile. He already had the golden ticket. Einheit aggressively pushed the same old playbook: unite the fire squads, the armed forces, and the cops to drag these super thugs in alive, and let the broken justice system handle it. Utority stared at him in disbelief, asking if he was out of his freaking mind. That was the exact strategy that failed miserably, and look at the smoking crater of a world it left behind. Bizet stepped into the crossfire, challenging Utority to drop a better blueprint. His counterattack. A massive nationwide referendum. Let the people decide if Gang Yu gets to keep his license to kill. Suddenly the room was paralyzed by one earth-shattering question. Do they weaponize Gang Yu or chain him up? The council stared at him like he grew two heads, forcing the slick politician to spell it out. Instead of crying and screaming in this echo chamber, handing the power to the masses cuts out the noise. Weren't they all sworn servants of the public anyway? Wasn't that their sacred oath? Einheit slammed his fist, roaring that trusting a mob mentality with something this catastrophic was pure suicide. But Utority's eyes darkened with raw fury. He spat that Einheit was stabbing the very citizens he swore to protect right in the back. And he knew exactly why the coward was dodging the ballot. He knew the streets would vote for blood, and Einheit would lose. He locked eyes with Bizet, daring him to disagree. After a suffocating silence, the leader gave a slow nod. The public vote was officially on. Fast forward 2 weeks, and the polls crashed down like a hammer. A staggering 88% demanded blood, leaving a tiny 12% in the dust. It was an absolute crushing landslide for Utority, exactly as the mastermind predicted. His secretary broke down the brutal statistics. The overwhelming majority viewed the recent chaos as a full-blown declaration of war on the nation. These supervillains weren't criminals anymore. They were rabid, soulless beasts that needed to be put down permanently. Hiding behind red tape and courtrooms was a joke. The whole reason society was bleeding out was because they kept chasing this pathetic fairy tale delusion where nobody gets hurt. And the real shocker, Gang Yu wouldn't be the only executioner. The kill switch was just handed to every single hero on the roster. Meanwhile, the terrified 12% couldn't shake their dread. They believed Gang Yu was a ticking emotional time bomb, completely unhinged and destined to cross the line. The higher-ups view him as a ticking time bomb, way too dangerous to be handed a license to kill. They are terrified that granting him this absolute power will just repeat history, dragging up the exact same nightmares they faced with the old generation of heroes, placing him entirely above the law. That is a massive gamble for all of society. While Einheit tries playing the peacemaker, desperate to cater to everyone's feelings, Utority is absolutely sick of the endless nonsense. The voting results were crystal clear. Why on earth is he still dragging his feet? Bizet quickly shuts down the argument, knowing another pointless shouting match gets them nowhere. Instead, they need to bring Gang Yu straight to the room and hear his actual demands. Sitting face to face later, Bizet casually notes how long it has been since their last little chat, fully aware that the rumor mill has already caught him up to speed. With a cold nod of confirmation from Gang Yu, Bizet leans in, demanding to know his ultimate decision. Without hesitation, Gang Yu declares his intent to honor the vote and personally wipe every single villain off the map. Bizet nods in understanding, yet holds up a hand to ask if the votes had swung the complete opposite way, what would his next move have been? Completely unfazed, Gang Yu delivers the brutal truth. Even if the entire world stood against him, he still would have slaughtered those monsters. only to peacefully surrender himself to the authorities. A heavy silence follows as right before dismissing him, he drops a heavy name. If Rausa were still standing right beside them, how would she have handled this nightmare? A fleeting shadow of deep sorrow crosses Gang Yu's stoic face. His voice softens as he replies that Bezet would have to ask Rausa herself. Clearly forgetting what the phrase "one last question" actually means, Bezet throws out another inquiry. Once the dust finally settles and the bloodshed ends, will he actually step back into the shoes of a hero? Honestly, Gang Yu has absolutely no clue. Wearing a cape is pretty much the very last thing on his mind right now. Fast forward a few days. The unprecedented execution law officially gets the green light. He proudly announces that Officer Gang Yu has been granted absolute, unchecked authority to eradicate any and all criminals. This drastic measure is their ultimate weapon to crush the massive prison break fallout. Glued to the screen of his phone, Authority watches the broadcast with an incredibly satisfied grin. Finally, they are dragging this chaotic world right back to the glory of the good old days. With the massive broadcast airing live, the entire globe tunes in. While some citizens loudly question the extreme violence, grieving families simply clutch their shattered hearts, desperately praying that true justice is finally on its way. Naturally, this juicy piece of news reaches Sinka's ears. A twisted smile forms on her lips. It is finally time to make their move. She eagerly hopes her personal squad of executioners is strapped in for some serious fun. And oh, one of them most definitely is. Barely any time passes before chaos erupts. Bizarre reports flood in of terrified civilians receiving eerie letters of invitation directly from swirling blue portals. And then, hovering right over a densely populated metropolis, a colossal rift tears open the sky. Fueled by Swed's terrifying magic, a catastrophic explosion rains down, instantly vaporizing the screaming citizens trapped inside the blast radius. As the smoke clears, Swede touches down alongside Hojo Young and Morez. They immediately snap at him, calling him an absolute idiot. What if one of those... Why on earth would he just launch a blind, reckless assault like that? Annoyed Swede barks at her to get completely off his back. If a pathetic little blast was enough to end them, then they clearly didn't deserve a spot in their ranks anyway. They have absolutely zero room for fragile weaklings. Meanwhile, flashing across Sinka hijacks the broadcast, greeting the terrified masses with a sick... She cheerfully announces that starting this exact second, the systematic eradication of anyone carrying incompatible genes will officially... So they might as well just freeze in place and accept that their pathetic lives are officially over. Miles away from the panic, Gang Yu quietly gears up for the looming bloodbath, steeling his mind for absolute war. It takes almost no time for the secretary to brief him on the monstrous targets tied to the recent breakout, pulling their heavily classified profiles straight from the deep archives of the Hero Association. Target number 1 is Swed, a lethal summoning type previously bagged by Mago. This maniac literally carves the stolen summoning abilities of his fallen victims directly into his skin as glowing tattoos, unleashing them whenever he pleases. He can effortlessly mirror incoming summoning skills, yet this brute heavily prefers raining down pure explosive destruction to get exactly what he wants. Next on the hit list is Ho, a terrifying physical brawler originally locked up by Yuji. She can violently contort her flesh to morph into a savage fox demon, allowing her to effortlessly shred through massive crowds of victims. Weirdly enough, she supposedly craves a master to tame her wild nature, though those creepy rumors remain strictly unconfirmed. Then we have Joe Young, a nasty, special-type rogue formerly contained by the Hero Hub. His deadly trick is vastly simpler than the rest of the crew. He simply drags out horrifying demonic entities that look like they crawled straight out of cursed ancient murals. Sure, his raw physical strength might be pathetic, but his overwhelming swarm tactics make him a massive, undeniable threat. Finally rounding out this squad of freaks is Moors, another bizarre special type famously brought. Take Tomoki. At first glance, she blends right in with your average superpowered folks. But the intel on her powers is a total mess. Reports clash, hinting she's packing more than one trick up her sleeve, even showing she choked the life out of someone using nothing but thin air. To put it mildly, her skill set is an absolute puzzle. Meanwhile, the Hero Association doesn't waste a second scrambling their top fighters towards Portugal to contain the chaos. Authority, however, just rolls his eyes at the backup. He knows those capes won't stand a chance against them anyway. Baze quickly grasps the gravity of the threat and barks orders sending every unit to their battle stations. The fire department is tasked with pulling innocent bystanders from the rubble, while the armed forces and local cops form a human shield for any survivors they stumble upon. He demands to know Gangyu's whereabouts from El Gato, who casually drops that the heavy hitter is already charging straight into the war zone. Based on the whispers from the former Terminus warden, Einheit is absolutely stunned that she hasn't been handed her walking papers yet. Then Baze presses for answers, desperately asking if there's any intel on the monsters they are facing. The secretary draws a complete blank on their identities, but Cinca's game plan for the villains is chillingly straightforward. Their mission: slaughter anyone carrying unchosen genetics without mercy, and escort those who embraced the dark invitations straight into their twisted alpha world. This hit squad might be tiny, but it's just a bloody appetizer for the carnage to come. Once the dust settles, reeling in the rest of the invitees will be a total breeze. So while they are definitely out for blood, snatching up the chosen ones remains their absolute priority. The genetic rejects. They can be wiped out whenever. There is absolutely no need to rush the slaughter. Surprisingly, Morris steps up as the crew's anchor of sanity, snapping at the others to cut out the mindless demolition. Their violent warm-up is officially over, so it's time to focus and execute Cinca's exact orders. Ho and Ju-young nod along, but Aswad straight up rebels. He's going to do whatever the hell he wants. He vows to keep smashing everything into dust, until the invited targets finally crawl out of the woodwork. Morris glares, warning him that he is dangerously crossing the line. Is he seriously going to spit in their leader's face? Aswad just sneers, daring her to make a move. With the tension skyrocketing, Ju-young casually summons a pitch-black crow and takes to the skies. If the meathead refuses to listen, they might as well let him off his leash. Morris clicks her tongue in disgust, promising to snitch on his little tantrum straight to Cinca the second they return. Aswad couldn't care less, happily reducing the city block to rubble. He lets out an exhausted sigh. Being free from that hellhole of a prison hasn't changed a damn thing, which absolutely infuriates him. It's all painfully repetitive. No matter how many buildings he levels, his raw power refuses to grow. His so-called gift is a literal curse. He suspected this cruel joke from day one, meaning he's stuck scavenging and stealing until he finally claws his way to the top. Out of nowhere, a massive, monstrous rabbit drops from the sky, aiming to flatten, but he throws up a magical barrier just in the nick of time. His eyes widen when he spots Lepus pulling the strings. She smirks, noting his brutal nature hasn't shifted an inch. Even after rotting in a cell for years, he is still pure, irredeemable garbage. Aswad just laughs off the insult, praising her dramatic entrance, before hitting her where it hurts. He asks with a smirk, did Mago get a decent funeral over in Lisbon? Meanwhile, over at the Ability Academy, a cluster of students watches the city burn from the windows. Panic visibly washing over them, as one kid openly admits he is terrified. Their mentor Prof steps up with a reassuring smile. He vows to lay down his life for them if necessary, but just to play it safe, he orders an immediate orderly evacuation to the underground bunker. Suddenly a slow, mocking clap echoes through the hall. Morris materializes right in front of them, sarcastically praising his picture-perfect dedication to the kids. The terrified students instantly cower behind their teacher's back, a sight Morris finds painfully pathetic. Prof immediately recognizes the threat, catching Morris slightly off guard. But she purrs that he shouldn't tremble, since she knows he scored an exclusive invite. She heavily implies he should walk away with her while she is still playing nice. Unfazed Prof commands her to back the hell off, swearing he will never surrender a single student. Morris clicks her tongue, mocking his absolute lack of brains, especially for daring to interrupt her pitch. It seems he's begging for a brutal lesson in etiquette, right in front of his precious audience, doesn't he? Now, the Ability Academy wasn't just built for fun. It rose from the ashes of Miel and Mael's. Rauza and Mago laid the actual foundation, creating a safe haven to train gifted youth on how to handle their explosive powers. Within these walls, veteran hero instructors guide the kids on blending into normal society despite their freakish gifts, while mastering the deadly potential hiding right at their fingertips. Back in the present, Morris hurls her hat skyward and unleashes her Manner Zone. A bizarre vortex sucks everyone straight into the dark void of the head, dragging her right in alongside them. Before the victims can even scream in terror, Morris brutally silences the crowd by clamping heavy muzzles over their faces, and lets out a satisfied sigh, thrilled to finally enjoy a moment of dead silence. You see, her chilling power is literally dubbed. It only triggers against targets she views as absolute peasants beneath her boot. Once trapped, she can force crippling restrictions on their bodies and inflict horrific damage with just a single. Glaring at her captives, she delivers a cold-blooded warning they'd better not try, and fully authorized to execute them on the spot, she commands the 3 chosen kids to step up. As they shuffle forward, Morris immediately spots their hidden potential. Each one harbors a rare, highly versatile power. She declares that this trio will assist her glorious queen in forging a brand new world, though she graciously offers them a choice to join or. One brave kid pipes up, questioning if this so-called queen is that same woman who hijacked the television broadcast. Morris proudly confirms it. She praises her leader as an absolute visionary, a gorgeous mastermind, destined to be their savior. But the boy doesn't buy it, flat out rejecting the offer. He points out the glaring flaw. That woman openly threatened to slaughter anyone born without powers, and there is no way he would ever lay a finger on his powerless everyday friends. The other 2 kids nod in fierce agreement. Their own parents lack abilities of fate they didn't choose, so why should they be punished? On top of that, their beloved teacher ingrained in them that hating someone simply for being different is flat out wrong. He taught them that anyone using their powers to bully others is pure evil. Standing their ground, the trio boldly labels Morris a villain. They swear they will never join her twisted cause. Snapping at their defiance, Morris unleashes her lethal power, a suffocating force designed to choke the life out of its prey. But before the kids can even gasp, Prof lunges forward, absorbing the agonizing blow meant for his students. He tanks the invisible strike flawlessly, utilizing his unique capability to soak up damage from special-type attacks. He's an unbreakable human shield. Watching this, Morris finally understands why Cinca craved him for her ranks. He would make the ultimate protector. Snuffing him out right now would be a massive waste of talent. Gasping for breath, Prof reveals they know all about her tragic childhood. But before he can spill another word, Morris viciously cuts him off. She figures Tomoki ran his mouth, glaring daggers, as she warns him that digging into a lady's past is a fatal mistake. She didn't come here to reminisce. Her sovereign commanded her to draft elites for their upcoming alpha utopia. She offers him a deal, hand over the kids, and but Prof doesn't even hesitate. He firmly rejects her, swearing he'd never betray. Morris scoffs in total confusion, wondering if one of these brats is his own flesh and blood. Prof shakes his head, stating a much simpler truth. He is their educator, and protecting them is his duty. You see, Prof is a veteran of the Hero Association and a dedicated instructor at the Ability Academy. Despite wielding a defensive barrier tough enough to tank hits from level B4 threats and above, he was sidelined as a measly Tier 5 hero back when Utority ran the show. The old chairman dismissed his power as garbage, strictly because it lacked the lethal fire. However, the tides massively shifted the moment Ryosa seized control of the association. Prof felt that change immediately. Out of nowhere, she approached him with a life-changing offer, a teaching gig at the academy. Initially, he braced himself for a demotion, having been told 1,000,000 times that his skills were practically useless. But Ryosa quickly crushed that insecurity. She actually wanted him to juggle both roles, shaping minds, while still working as an active hero. To her, molding the next generation was the ultimate mission, and she specifically needed the most extraordinary heroes to shoulder that immense responsibility. Stunned, Prof confessed he didn't feel worthy of such high praise, but Ryosa looked him dead in the eye, declaring that no one outshone him. He was a rare breed, the kind of protector who would throw away his own life to shield a stranger without a second thought. In that moment, Prof experienced something entirely new, genuine profound appreciation from another person. Back in the present, Morris smirks, calculating that if she can just brainwash the kids, their stubborn teacher will naturally fall in line. But Prof steps up, warning her that their fragile world is currently balancing on a knife's edge. With powers erupting and endless wars brewing, their entire society is on the brink of collapse. A nightmare they've lived through before. True heroes have bled and sacrificed everything just to keep this chaotic civilization intact. Morris rolls her eyes, completely missing the point. Prof's actual message is crystal clear. If her unhinged queen's twisted vision takes root, their hard-won peace will instantly shatter into pure chaos. Her eyes flash with murderous intent as she orders him to keep the queen's name out of his mouth. To her, this is just a pathetic excuse to decline her offer if the current establishment burns to the ground. But Prof passionately pleads his case. If they let history repeat itself, and anarchy tears the system apart, society will only breed more deeply traumatized children, kids exactly like her. That hits a massive nerve, and Morris erupts in blind fury. What the hell does he actually know about her trauma? Prof softly reminds her that they already uncovered her dark history, pleading with her to walk away from this. But Morris is totally done with his endless yapping. Screaming that he doesn't understand a damn thing, she ruthlessly slams everyone into the dirt with her overwhelming pressure. That sickens her, even with him bleeding out. The professor keeps siphoning the children's agony into his own body, pushing himself to the absolute brink of blacking out. Morris, though, is completely oblivious. She couldn't care less about their survival. As far as she's concerned, they're all dead meat the second she wraps up her little monologue. Out of nowhere, Gongyu stomps his heavy boot down on her tiny skull, instantly pegging her as the Class B3 scum she really is. He growls a simple threat: summon that lunatic woman right now, unless she wants her head popped open like a squashed grape. Morris chokes out a question asking if by lunatic he means their beloved queen. Gongyu coldly confirms. But he makes it crystal clear: Morris is on his hit list too. Furious at the heavy dark chains instantly wrap around Gongyu, violently dragging him under a massive guillotine aimed. Gongyu isn't fazed in the slightest. With just 2 lightning-fast motions, he shatters her power and delivers a bone-crushing right hook straight to her jaw. The entire room freezes in pure disbelief. Turning back, Gongyu barks at the professor to evacuate immediately, but they are completely paralyzed, still trapped in her lingering spell. To break the curse, Gongyu drives a devastating blow deep into Morris's stomach, unleashing a shockwave that violently rattles the entire building. The brutal impact successfully shatters the invisible hold on the and they don't waste a single second leaving him alone to haul Morris off the floor and kick off the actual interrogation. His voice goes ice cold. He is only asking one time: she needs to drag that woman out here right now or face the fatal consequences. Backed into a corner, a desperate Morris unleashes lady mode. Within mere seconds, her physical form violently twists and transforms. It has been ages since she tapped into this majestic state. Suddenly, 2 sharply whispering that ladies always go first. But Morris is far from done. Popping open her umbrella, she manifests her ultimate lady zone, granting her absolute dominance over the entire battlefield. Smirking, she mocks him, calling him incredibly unlucky. This elegant form is her true original self, and the moment this terrifying mode awakens, anyone who perceives her as a lady falls instantly under her hypnotic control. It functions exactly like her previous mind-bending trick, but amplified to an insane degree. Her only real goal right now is stalling for precious seconds, so she starts rambling. She claims she just wanted to help the crew finish Sinka's mission and make it back alive. So she swallowed her fear and desperately tried to run the clock. Unamused, Gongyu realizes she has zero intention of cooperating. To him, she is nothing but an absolute idiot. Morris cries out that he just does not get it. If the queen had chosen her instead, she would be ignoring the rant. Gongyu sparks up his lethal aura. Panicking, Morris screams at him to wait, promising to reveal the queen's exact location. But he flatly rejects the offer. He promises to drag her broken remains to a mind-reading psychic and just extract the memories directly from her lifeless head. That terrifying loophole never even crossed her mind, meaning dying right here achieves absolutely nothing. Trembling, she asks what he plans to do once he is about to throw down with every single enemy in that room. Does he honestly believe he stands a ghost of a chance? Even the queen lacks the mercy to let him walk away a second time. But Gongyu completely tunes her out. So sensing the impending doom, Morris decides to completely erase her own presence before he can make a move. Too bad she misses her window. Just then a blinding blue aura erupts across the space, and Sinka phases into view. Sinka is actually caught off guard that Gongyu demanded this little reunion. She wonders if the guy finally had a change of heart. Morris screams a frantic warning that stepping into this war zone is pure suicide. Sinka just smirks, fully anticipating the hostility. I guess that confirms he hasn't flipped sides just yet. Refusing to entertain her twisted mind games, Gongyu brutally shatters the defensive barrier she just threw up. He is dead set on burning through every last drop of his life force just to make sure she rots 6 feet under. A flicker of genuine terror crosses Sinka's eyes, yet she isn't mad about it at all. In fact, she gets an absolute thrill out of his violently dark obsession. She brushes Morris off, claiming she will handle the heavy lifting from here. Her new orders track down the fools who dared to reject her exclusive invitations. Before Morris can even open her mouth to reply, Gang Yu launches a devastating assault. Sinka barely manages to yank Morris out of the strike zone, saving her just milliseconds before she gets sliced completely in half. But the brutal damage is already done. The moment Morris materializes on the safe side, she violently hacks from the sickened. Meanwhile, the professor frantically pushes the children towards safety. Sinka's eyes go wide. Ganyu isn't holding anything back. He's going absolutely nuclear right out of the gate, growling that this very spot is about. Her mind races. To pull off a move this devastating, he has to be tapped into mode 0. The guy is completely burning himself out. Ganyu lunges, throwing a vicious strike. But Sinka summons her portals just in time, swallowing every single blow. The spatial rifts spit his own raw power right back into his chest. But here's the kicker. His muscles just absorb the impact like it's panicking. Sinka screams for backup. Canis and Gato instantly tear through a fresh portal, hitting the ground ready for a bloodbath. But the second they lock eyes on Ganyu, they freeze. Gato immediately shrinks back, whimpering that they made a huge mistake coming out here. Sinka, "Is this too much for you mutts to handle?" she snaps. Gato frantically nods, begging her to just stall for time instead of trying to slaughter this monster. "He popped his ultimate technique right off the bat," he cries out. "How the hell are we supposed to survive that?" Sinka actually takes the hint. But when she tries to warp, nothing happens. Her powers are completely jammed. Ganyu wasn't just talking trash earlier. He meant every word. She's going to die here. Welcome to his absolute domain, the Dark Heaven Prison. It's a terrifying pocket dimension, forged from his pure aura, an inescapable trap. Sure, Sinka managed to yank Huang out of trouble in the past, but that was only because she cast her warp from the outside. Now she's locked inside the cage. Her teleportation is completely dead. Ganyu closes the distance in a flash, throwing an earth-shattering hook. Sinka barely manages to throw up a barrier, the glass shattering under the sheer force. Gato and Canis smell the stench of death. They drop to their knees, desperately pleading with her to take off their leashes. But Sinka bites her lip. She made a blood oath to Huang. She promised to save Ganyu's head for him once he finally grew up. Canis snarls, "If you don't unleash us right now, none of us are walking out of here alive." Sinka grits her teeth and caves, praying Huang will forgive her later. But right before she screams out the command, the atmosphere completely shifts. The two beasts snap their heads up to the sky, letting out agonizing primal howls. Sinka and Ganyu follow their gaze, staring up at a lone figure hovering above. The absolute pinnacle of humanity. The one man standing at the top of the food chain. You could throw 10, 100, or 1,000 elite killers at him, and he wouldn't even blink. The exact second you cross his path, your life is over. That's why no one ever dares. That is the true weight of being an unrivaled god among men. So, what's going through Ganyu's head right now? Does he crave that ultimate throne too? He's totally caught off guard by Kingston crashing the party. The old legend looks down smirking. He admits the kid, but he's definitely no god. Not yet anyway, though Kingston wouldn't mind giving him a few pointers. Furious, Sinka screams at the sky. What the? How dare some washed-up geezer crash her execution? Kingston doesn't even blink. He casually throws a long-range jab straight. In a total panic, Sinka burns every ounce of her remaining energy to warp a few feet away, screeching that she wasn't done talking. Kingston just chuckles. Back in his golden days, little girls knew better than to run their mouths when the adults were handling business. Sinka opens her mouth to curse him out, but suddenly tastes copper. Warm blood is dripping down her nose. The shockwave actually bypassed her space Canis, and Gato start panicking for their master, but Sinka isn't scared. She is absolutely seething. How dare a wrinkled corpse lay a finger on her? Kingston just stretches his massive shoulders, laughing that he's got plenty of gas left in the tank. He's standing taller than ever. But hey, maybe a brat with a brain that small just can't comprehend true power. That completely sets Sinka off. She snaps her fingers, ripping open hundreds of spatial voids all around the old man, praying to shred him into absolute meat confetti. But before the portals even fully manifest, a massive shadow falls over her back. He's already behind her. Kingston casually admits her powers are hell. With a trick like that, she might even stand a chance against Huang. But The two of them share one fatal, pathetic weakness. Kingston drives his fist right into her gut. The impact is so violently destructive, her own defensive barrier shatters into a million pieces. "You rely way too much on your fancy little magic tricks," he growls. Now class is in session. He's about to give her a front-row ticket to what a body forged in absolute hellfire actually looks like. But out of nowhere, 3 jagged portals tear open behind his neck. Canis lunges through the void, claws bared for the kill. Kingston swats the deadly ambush away, like a pesky fly. But he has to admit the lecture he just gave Cinca definitely doesn't apply to her guard dogs. These mutts are built like absolute tanks. Desperate to survive, Cinca and her 2 beasts swarm the old man all at once, throwing everything they have to take his head off. Meanwhile, Ganyu just stands there. Seeing Kingston drop out of the sky definitely rattled him at first. But now that it's painfully obvious whose side this legend is on, Ganyu cracks his knuckles. They are going to put this arrogant woman in the dirt right here, right now, and finally crush her twisted regime. Miles away, the intel finally reaches Beza. The reports are screaming and Kingston. Not only that, but he's already made contact with Ganyu. Bauda rubs his chin, chuckling that the old master has always been an unpredictable wild card. Guevara nods and the geezer must have found a shiny new toy to play with. Bezai frowns nervously, asking if Ganyu is caught in the crossfire of this monster. But Guevara just waves it off, knowing Kingston the Kid is going to be just. While Kingston's absolute power remains completely off the charts, the crew senses zero killer intent. Boda quickly backs up this gut feeling. Kingston stays totally chilled out, but the real mystery is the empty seat at the table. Someone is acting incredibly erratic. Morris is absolutely floored. Why on earth would some shiny academy textbook feature her personal life story? It's beyond stupid, and it ticks her off to no end. So she demands they shut their traps. But Prof steps in, clarifying she isn't the only target. Every single inmate locked up in this facility has their history recorded. Morris snaps back, demanding to know if this is just some sick joke to spit on their legacy. Prof shakes his head. It is not malicious at all. The goal is purely psychological, meant to understand what makes them tick as human beings. When word hit the streets that Rauza and Mago established the Ability Academy, a certain prison officer immediately tracked them down. That officer was Gang Ho. His ultimate goal, shoving criminology straight into the curriculum. Morris scoffs at the absolute absurdity of it all, but she glares right at them, asking the million-dollar question. After reading through her dark history, what do they actually think of her? Prof opens his mouth to answer, but a massive, terrifying figure suddenly cuts him off, demanding to know why he is casually socializing with a monster. The newcomer sneers that Prof has not evolved one bit. He fears Prof just freezes, completely blindsided by this. Authority ignores him and commands the kids to listen up. Their entire education is pure garbage, and he is about to deliver a brutal reality check. He spits out that villains are never forged by some pathetic, tear-jerking sob story about their tough little childhoods. Weak-minded fools, driven by pure emotion, love to preach that a toxic environment creates a killer. They use those cheap words to beg for sympathy, completely ignoring the hard truth that these scumbags were always wired to cause chaos. They are genetic mistakes, the absolute tumors of society, and cancerous lumps like them must be ruthlessly carved out. He cracks his knuckles, promising the students a lot. Morris snarls back, demanding how she is the disease, when the whole damn world is already rotten. Authority coldly silences her. Absolutely sick to his stomach of their disgusting excuses, he warns her that he will lay down. No matter what era or perfect society they were born into, they would still inevitably end up as bottom-feeding trash. They are nothing but worthless freaks of nature who never deserve to draw their very first breath. The agony he is about to unleash will not even scratch the surface of the hell she put her victims and their grieving families through. But he fully intends to drag out her suffering, pushing her physical torment to the absolute maximum limit. He casually glances down at his freshly strapped wristwatch. 10 minutes. 10 minutes is more than enough time to break her. Authority boasts a lethal mix of physical and special abilities. Unfazed, Morris aims her umbrella fiercely, daring him to just bring it on. He does not hesitate for a single second. He rockets forward, burying a fist so deep into her gut that it tears skin and forces her to puke blood. Yet she cleverly rides the kinetic shockwave to gain some distance. Heavy steel chains instantly materialize all around her in defense, but Authority absolutely refuses to give her an inch of breathing room. He surges back in with a devastating hook, triggering his acceleration ability. His speed warps reality, making the strikes completely invisible. Only the fresh, bloody wounds blooming on Morris's body prove she is. Once she is battered and weak, he violently yanks her head down ruthlessly, driving his knee right into her teeth, over and over again. A truly sickening rhythm of violence. He mockingly asks if it hurts. Clearly, Tomei coddled her way too much during her time in lockup. Blinded by pure, unadulterated rage, Morris unleashes a deafening shriek. A massive denial zone erupts around her, instantly summoning the eerie gentleman from earlier to drag Authority into the abyss. But Authority just smirks, firing up his acceleration to completely obliterate the Phantom in a mere fraction of a heartbeat. Pushing to 4 times his normal speed, he teleports right in front of her, caving her face in with a skull-crushing blow. Blood violently gushes. Blurring behind her instantly, he launches her helpless body high into the sky. The completely one-sided massacre just keeps escalating. A crimson shower rains down. Prof and the students stand paralyzed, completely unable to track Authority's movements. He is literally moving faster than the human eye can even process. Gathering power, for a final brutal strike, he spikes Morris down. She craters into the earth like her shattered body is screaming in too much agony for her to even register the impact. Looking down at her, Authority absolutely relishes knowing exactly how much torture she is enduring. He coldly states that this twisted expression of pure despair is the only face a monster like her deserves. Then he mercilessly stomps his heavy boot. He lectures her broken body, declaring that the innocent lives she ruined and the families still drowning in grief today deal with a trauma far deeper than some broken bones. It is a soul-crushing emotional hell that a complete sociopath like her has never. Checking his watch amidst the bloody carnage, he realizes he still has about 3 minutes left on the clock. Choking on her own blood, Morris barely gasps out a question, asking if his power is time acceleration. Authority proudly confirms her guess. When his ability is active, he becomes a god of momentum. He has absolute control over the flow of time for any physical object. Clearly, this guy can warp the flow of time. He wants her to savor every ounce of this agony, dragging out her demise, like the parasite she is. In reality, barely a few seconds tick by, but for Morris, it feels like months of endless bone-crushing torture. Authority finally releases his grip. What a shame. If he wasn't on the clock, he would have stretched her suffering even further. Suddenly, a raspy chuckle escapes Morris's lips. Authority raises an eyebrow. Did the sheer terror of death finally snap her fragile mind? Morris shoots it to him straight. Sure, staring death in the face is terrifying, but that is not what is so damn funny. She honestly doubted she could pull this mission off, especially like this, but man, is she thrilled. Authority demands answers. Smirking, Morris drops the bombshell. If her heart stops beating, every single person marked by her power gets dragged straight down to hell alongside her. It is the ultimate dead man switch. Panic washes over Prof, but Authority silences him with a single ice-cold glare. Meanwhile, across the battered city, Kingston flows through the battlefield like a phantom. He deflects incoming strikes with flawless precision, countering with bone-shattering hooks. Blinded by sheer rage, Goto lunges forward in a reckless frenzy. It is a fatal miscalculation. Kingston slams her into the concrete with devastating force. Canis shrieks, desperately ordering her to unleash her full power, but Kingston instantly drops him right beside her. How pathetically arrogant. Did these fools really think they were strong enough to hold back? They have grown incredibly lazy, relying on their cheap tricks. But hey, no need to stress. He is about to teach them a lesson they will never forget. Faster than the blink of an eye, both of their hands are cleanly severed from their wrists. Blood-curdling screams rip from their throats. Kingston just smirks. He knows they have got a half-decent healer hiding in the wings. Cinco watches the carnage in absolute disbelief. Just who the hell is that monstrous old man? But her window to panic slams shut. Gangyu explodes into her space. A crushing jab launches her through the air, making her skip across the pavement like a tossed stone. She desperately gasps for air, but Gangyu gives zero breathing room. He rockets forward for round 2. Frantic, she tries to ambush him using her spatial portals, but he casually shatters her defenses, planting a devastating kick right into her stomach. She crumples to the dirt, completely defenseless. Her tough facade instantly crumbles. She sobs, pleading for a second chance, but Gangyu's well of mercy ran dry a long time ago. He buries his fists into her gut over and over again, Every single impact echoes louder than the last. Godo and Canis watch in pure horror as their leader gets pulverized. Gang Yu winds up his signature, earth-shattering blow, forcing Sinka to shriek that she refuses to die in this wasteland. This was not part of her plan. Gang Yu just glares down at her with pure venom, throwing the executioner's strike. But Kingston suddenly catches his arm. He tells the fighter to stand down. After all, this victory was not achieved on his own. True apex predators should never need a helping hand. Back at the other showdown, Authority coldly demands Morris to repeat her little threat, so she gladly obliges. Every soul tainted by her power will perish. How is he going to play this? Authority simply commands the room's attention. With chilling calm, he offers his deepest, most sincere condolences for their doomed soul. Without skipping a beat, he plunges his strike straight through Morris's heart. His face remains an unreadable mask. Sure, if he took her in for treatment, there was a slim chance she might have deactivated the curse. But if she slipped through their fingers during the process, millions of innocent civilians would instantly drop dead. Weighed against a massacre of that scale, cutting out a tiny sliver of flesh to eradicate a cancer is the only logical move. Collateral damage to healthy cells is just a tragic inevitability. The greater good always demands blood. To honor their tragic fate, he promises to arrange proper funerals for the victims. Suddenly, a sinister aura erupts from Morris's lifeless corpse. Authority senses the sheer malice quietly relieved she could only trigger this nightmare post-mortem. Facing this while she was breathing would have been a massive headache. He casually wishes his allies luck, though he wagers Prof will not really need it. The guy is built like a tank. He will probably pull through. Right then, a terrifying spectral phantom of Morris claws its way out of her remains. The ghost cackles, declaring it is time to take the plunge into the abyss together. Spectral chains instantly bind everyone in the room. The kids are completely paralyzed with dread, but Prof gently tells the little ones to close their eyes. He swears he will not let anything scratch them. The phantom Morris snarls, demanding to know what the hell he is babbling, but Prof catches her words, his resolve unbreakable. The students are going to survive this. He's the only one dragging her straight down to hell. Across the battlefield, Gang Yu throws a devastating right hook at Kingston. The sheer force leaves the older fighter stunned, realizing this kid has the raw power to stand at the absolute peak of the martial world. But it was a brilliant fake-out. Gang Yu pivots, redirecting his lethal momentum straight towards Sinka, the very person Kingston swore to guard. Kingston steps in, warning the kid not to brush past a grizzled veteran when he just wants to chat. Furious at the interruption, Gang Yu refuses to let his target slip away. He winds up for another explosive strike, but the very atmosphere violently shatters between them. Kingston totally gets the kid's burning rage. Still, letting emotions dictate the fight won't solve the damn thing. Gang Yu's instincts scream at him. If that incoming shockwave connects, he is dead meat. He violently twists out of the way, just in time. The missed attack viciously rips a massive crater through the building's roof, splitting the very clouds above. Sinka stands completely paralyzed by fear. But Kingston barks at her to run for her life. This is her one and only window to escape. Swallowing her pride, she grits her teeth and scrambles away, dragging her two fiercely loyal bodyguards right alongside her. Now it's just Kingston and Gang Yu left standing in the rubble. The old man cracks a smirk, suggesting they finally have a proper heart-to-heart talk. No interruptions. Gang Yu simply roars and lunges forward, practically foaming with anger. Kingston chuckles, letting their fists do the talking. Isn't a half-bad idea. Meanwhile, Prof calmly admits the bitter truth about his powers. Just like Authority pointed out, his skills are strictly honestly, he used to absolutely despise his own powers. He genuinely thought he'd be better off entirely powerless. But then a certain someone opened his eyes, proving that this very shield is exactly what a broken society desperately needs. Pushing his limits to the absolute brink, he vows to absorb every single ounce of lethal damage meant for his students. Baffled Morris demands to know why he's throwing his life away for a bunch of brats. Prof simply smiles. He already told her. He is their educator. Morris just can't wrap. How does a job title justify dying a miserable, lonely death? Prof gazes at her with deep pity, fully aware she lacks the capacity to comprehend his sacrifice. They come from two vastly different realities. She was molded by absolute monsters, forged into a soulless slaughtering machine with one singular, bloody objective. Morris snarls at him to shut his mouth, but Prof sees right through her. He knows she never had a say in her own destiny. Manipulated. Far worse than a cheap marionette. "Shut up!" she screams, her voice trembling. Prof knows her innocence was robbed from day one. She was forced down a pitch-black road. All to build a so-called utopia that she was never even meant to be a part. Morris shrieks at him to just shut up, but the teacher refuses to back down. As he drags them both into the abyss, he swears to re-educate every twisted lie she was ever taught. A true mentor's ultimate duty is laying down their very life to guarantee the next generation's tomorrow. From the very second he accepted his role at the Ability Academy, he was dead set on offering up his own soul to protect his kids. One of the terrified students begs him to stop crying out, but Prof offers a warm, reassuring smile. Everything is going to be perfectly fine. He simply asks them to grow up into spectacular people, because they are the shining hope of humanity. Hearing this, Morris completely loses her mind. A dark, suppressed memory violently clawing its way back to the years ago. A chillingly elegant instructor named Taylum stepped into the room, announcing herself as their new guiding light. She used those exact same words, claiming they were the grand future. Prowling through the grim orphanage, Taylum handpicked gifted kids, tossing them into a hellish academy she constructed for one sinister goal. She blatantly declared her ambition to conquer the entire globe, crowning herself the absolute queen. And every single class they took was meticulously designed to brainwash them. She sweetly warned them to pay razor-sharp attention, stressing that failure wasn't an option. Blindly, little Morris and the others absorbed her toxic lessons. For agonizing years, the curriculum consisted of optimizing their powers to butcher targets as efficiently as possible. They endured psychological torture, twisted etiquette drills, and brutal loyalty exams. Absolute atrocities no child should ever witness, let alone study. But Morris adapted brilliantly, her lethal talents skyrocketing faster than anyone else's. That ruthless perfection earned her Taylum's toxic favoritism, ultimately crowning her the supreme class monitor. Wielding that sickening authority, she brutally disciplined her peers whenever Taylum demanded it. After all, Morris was the ultimate brainwashed prodigy. Yet, when the twisted headmistress checked in on her after her very first day of leading the pack, the little girl confessed that beating her friends black and blue. Trembling, Morris asked why she felt such agonizing guilt. Taylum simply tilted her head and asked, "Do you like insects?" Morris admitted she despised them. A cruel smirk crept onto Taylum's face. She whispered that when apex predators look down on pathetic inferior creatures, pure disgust is the only. She praised the sickening feeling as totally normal. She promised that as time marched on, her weak classmates would hopefully evolve into proper, useful tools. And when they finally did that, crippling wave of nausea would completely vanish. Until then, she just needed to keep up her ruthless, bloody work. That conversation confirmed it. She was practically born for this role. But Morris couldn't shake that sickening, churning sensation twisting up her stomach. It screamed that disaster was brewing. Yet exactly as Taylum promised, that gnawing dread melted away the closer they crept to graduation. Taylum beamed with pride, praising her students for surviving the grueling curriculum. In just 12 months, they would officially graduate into adulthood, and she would reign supreme over the entire globe. Her grand, twisted design was unfolding absolutely flawlessly. She had successfully forged an entire legion of fiercely They were mindless weapons, ready to execute her every command. But then a sudden catastrophe shattered her perfect reality. Taylum's elite butlers, terrifying powerhouses themselves, were effortlessly swatted down. The culprits, Clark and Yahello, the legendary top-tier special-type heroes. Even Taylum crumbled almost instantly under their crushing. Honestly, Clark was baffled. The boss Euphority had explicitly warned them to tread lightly around her. Maybe Clark had just grown stupidly overpowered. It also blew his mind that she actually constructed an entire academy just to brainwash kids into her radical cult. You had to hand it to her, the woman dreamed massive. Yahello casually suggested they raid the academy next. Clark practically groaned, completely unmotivated. But she reminded him that Euphority would throw a massive fit. Skipping it wasn't an option, so they reluctantly dragged themselves over. They herded the frantic students into the courtyard and brutally dumped their beloved teacher's lifeless corpse front and center. Then, with zero empathy, they declared the academy permanently. Staring at the bloody ruin of their sole reason for existing, the children utterly snapped. They unleashed a furious, desperate stampede straight at the heroes. Yahello barely even blinked. With a lazy snap of her fingers, she blasted the entire mob backward, knocking them out cold before they even hit the dirt. Clark let out a low whistle, genuinely stunned by their rabid devotion. Yahello tilted her head, wondering out loud if they should maybe haul the brats back to headquarters. Clark immediately shot that down. Scrubbing their brainwashed little heads and forcing them into normal society would drain way too much cash and energy. And honestly, even if the rehab worked deep down to their bones, these kids were lethal weapons. That toxic indoctrination would forever fester in the darkest corners of their minds. What was stopping them from snapping one day and slaughtering innocent civilians? Hell, for all they knew, these runts already had a staggering body count. Yahello hesitated, grasping for a counter-argument. After all, they had cornered these kids before they ever stepped foot in the real world. Rubbing his temples, Clark groaned about the colossal headache this was turning into, and demanded a final verdict. Shrugging, Yahello made her chilling choice. Keeping them breathing was just a ticking time bomb. The most efficient solution: exterminate them right here, right now. Their brains were already corrupted beyond saving. With their twisted sanctuary completely wiped off the map, it was an absolute guarantee they would evolve into supervillains anyway. Clark nodded in grim agreement. Better to get their hands a little bloody today than deal with a catastrophic mess tomorrow. They could always just fabricate some fake criminal records for the brats later. As they slowly advanced on the unconscious kids, Yahello playfully warned him not to overexert himself. But Clark's hardened gaze remained. Without a second thought, the two heroes unleashed a ruthless, sickening massacre upon the defenseless student. Trembling in the shadows, Morris simply couldn't comprehend the slaughter. Outside of attending their strange lectures, none of them had actually hurt a single living soul. Clark coldly laid out his brutal logic. They were a severe threat. Dumped like garbage by their deadbeat parents, they were left to rot in this hellhole of an orphanage. And tragically, this supposed sanctuary was secretly orchestrated by a psychotic criminal master. The only curriculum they ever absorbed was how to butcher and slaughter. To him, that screamed major liability. He sneered, claiming their own parents would probably agree. Raising a blood-soaked fist, he offered a hollow prayer that she might find a decent family in her next life. With crimson splashing across the walls, a deeply disturbing thrill washed over Yahello's face. Right as Clark lunged forward to execute Morris, his partner violently yanked his arm back. She told him she had seen enough, and they should just get moving already. Annoyed, Clark barked at her to be patient. He insisted on wiping out the very last breathing trace of this cursed academy. But Yahello practically begged him to spare the girl. The twisted aesthetic of a gore-soaked classroom packed with slaughtered children, crowned perfectly by one traumatized lone survivor. It sent a psychotic shiver of pure ecstasy down her spine. Clark just stared at her, genuinely disturbed by her freakish sadism. Capitalizing on their bizarre squabble, Morris scrambled into the darkness and bolted. She had narrowly escaped death entirely thanks to the sick, twisted whim of two psychopaths. Now completely alone, she drifted aimlessly through the world, an empty ghost with no refuge. After months of surviving purely on instinct, a mysterious stranger finally locked eyes with her. Instantly recognizing the unmistakable, he granted her a rank within his vanguard. Side by side, they planned to fan the flames of rebellion. The man was Caracas. Under his brutal command, Morris plunged and she slaughtered her way through legions of victims. Once Caracas perished, Tomei dragged her away in chains, shipping her straight to Ruculus. This twisted cycle became her only education. She genuinely believed this ruthless survival was her ultimate purpose. She assumed the entire globe operated on bloodshed. Yet after enduring decades of this nightmare, this man actually has the nerve to claim her reality is completely flawed. There was simply no way to swallow that truth. Back when Cinca first approached her, she offered absolute validation, promising that Morris was totally innocent. Cinca insisted the universe itself was broken. The moment she claimed the throne, she vowed to mold reality back into its perfect shape. She promised Morris a seamless fit into this new era. She handed her a sanctuary, an actual home, where she finally mattered. So this teacher had better choose his next words carefully. Echoing the exact venom Yutari and the rest spat at her. Was her very existence just a tragic error? With a remarkably soft tone, Prof replies that not a single soul on this earth breathes by mistake. The agonizing trauma she endured is undeniably tragic. He feels her profound pain. Still, that sorrow does not magically erase the mountain of atrocities she orchestrated. The body count is far too massive to simply brush aside. Therefore, he promises to walk by her side, offering warmth and comforting her scarred inner child from that horrific past. But more importantly, he vows to shoulder the heavy burden of her sins right alongside her. Why? Because that is exactly what a true educator does. Yet he holds one last desperate plea. Could she please block this gruesome sight from the innocent students? Morris barks at him to shut his mouth, instantly dropping the massive guillotine straight toward his neck. Facing his doom, Prof flashes a warm smile and gently instructs the kids to shut their eyes tight. It has been an absolute privilege guiding their young minds, a treasured memory he will carry into the afterlife. But mere inches before the blade slices into his flesh, a sickening crack echoes and Morris's body violently starts crumbling into dust. She refuses to let a saint like him share her damnation. Deep down, she always realized her path was soaked in she was simply too terrified to confess her guilt. Butchering her own comrades was undeniably sickening, yet those loyal fools still worshipped her twisted cause. They swore she was sacrificing everything for their sake. In reality, a wave of pure nausea washed over her whenever she saw a haunting reflection staring back from the crimson puddles, draining from her fallen allies. Later the moment Tomei ambushed her and fiercely demanded she stop acting like a mindless, bloody pawn. She caught another glimpse of her hollow soul, and the self-hatred intensified. Even locked away in that pathetic hellhole of a cell, peering down into her watery, miserable broth, that grotesque monster glared right back at her. The agony of self-awareness was practically suffocating. To survive, she built a fortress of denial. She forcibly buried those sickening emotions, convincing her shattered mind that her brutal upbringing was flawlessly correct. Society was the repulsive villain, not her. She desperately clung to that pathetic delusion for decades. But standing before a genuine mentor, witnessing the unwavering grace of a proper adult, her entire illusion shattered instantly. Stripped of her lies, her existence was nothing but hollow misery. She truly was a wretched, horrific monster. Meanwhile, the battle rages on, as Gong Yu relentlessly hurls furious blows at Kingston, deflecting every strike with effortless. What fueled this explosive rage? Is this boiling fury stemming from his pathetic failure to slaughter that psychotic kid? Or perhaps his inability to execute that defenseless girl? Would a shred of actual strength not fix this miserable dilemma? Seething with venom, Gong Yu roars at him to shut the hell, winding up for a lethal haymaker. Unfazed, Kingston smoothly counters, warning the furious boy that blindly lashing out will alter absolute. Throwing a tantrum will not save him. Unless he rapidly evolves and shatters his limits right now, executing that psycho brat remains an impossible dream. The same goes for the girl. At the core of this bloodshed, his ultimate obstacle is his own pathetic weakness. Take his recent failure as raw proof. The moment he lunged for the girl's throat, Kingston easily intercepted the blow. Had Gong Yu possessed genuine power, that interference would have meant nothing. This entire blind rage is simply a massive shield of denial. He is utterly disgusted with his own reflection. He outright refuses to swallow the bitter pill that he is nothing but fragile prey. Those piercing words strike a nerve, causing Gong Yu to yet gritting his teeth, the boy charges forward once again. Watching this reckless assault, a confident smirk creeps onto Kingston's face.